गिरिनन्दिनि नन्दितमेदिनि विश्वविनोदिनि नन्दिनुते गिरिवरविन्द्यशिरोदिनि वासिनि विष्णुविलासिनि जिष्णुनुते भगवति हेशितिकण्ठकुटुम्बिनि भूरि कुटुम्बिनि भूरि कृते जय जय हे महिषासुरमर्दिनि रम्यकपर्दिनि शैलसुते सुरवरवर्षिणि दुर्धरदर्शिनि दुर्मुखमर्षिणि हर्षरते त्रिभुवनपोषिणि शङ्करतोषिणि किल्बिषमोषिणि घोषरते धनुजनि रोषिणि दितिश्रुतरोषिणि दुर्मथतोषिणि सिन्धुसुते जय जय हे महिषासुरमर्दिनि रम्यकपर्दिनि शैलसुते जय जय हे महिषासुरमर्दिनि रम्यकपर्दिनि शैलसुते जय जय हे महिषासुरमर्दिनि रम्यकपर्दिनि शैलसुते
Hi guys, thank you for joining the live stream. I hope the audio is coming fine. Let me know if it isn't. So, hi Ninar, hi Aris, hi Jai Shri Ram. By the way, did you watch Navavimarsha live stream? Yeah, from the Navavimarsha account, whoever is handling it, I guess a lot of you are handling it at the same time, right? So yeah, that video was sent to me. I watched a bit of it, and it was a lot of fun. There was some great discussions, and I saw the comments of M. Shastri in the comment section as well. That was also very juicy, very fruitful, constructive discussions. Anit Dash is saying, আমার মনে হয় in future আরো এমন কিছু সিচুয়েশন তৈরি হবে যাতে ইন্ডিয়া চট্টগ্রাম এবং রংপুর ছিনিয়ে নেবে. Quite possibly. Okay, so today's paper, Dr. Sumit Guha's paper, has a very provocative title, and I've been meaning to get to this for a long time now. Ninar and M. Shastri have been also, I guess you all have read it already, right? So they have also been excited about the discussion for this paper. So it talks about, I think, so for those of you who are new viewers of ours and don't know the entire context, Sumit Guha is one of those academics, even if they are Marxist, even if they are not, even people like Romila Thapar, even Irfan Habib, these people are absolutely opposed to the way you know the criticism of caste system or casteism in India, okay? The fun part is that the entire view, basically to which the entirety of even RSS, BJP also agree, okay? Ambedkarites, mainstream liberals, okay? Casual liberals, casual politics followers, casual Hindus, Muslims, Christians, casual journalists, hardcore journalists all over the world. The consensus seems to be that casteism, caste-based bad behavior is obviously an evil thing, fair enough, but all of it stemmed from Hindu texts in general, and everyone did those bad behaviors by mugging up the pages of Manusmriti every morning they woke up and read, okay? And people like Irfan Habib, Romila Thapar, Declan Quigley, Nicholas Dirks, Sumit Guha, even Dayabati Roy, these people point out instances and example after example and show frameworks how that is not the case. Casteism was a way of small local autonomous groups governing themselves based on their professions. You can say profession-based guilds, associations, etc. And since different professions have different kinds of value and influence in society, and therefore power, therefore hierarchies arise and are born and occur inevitably even between those different guilds, and then every caste has some sort of discriminatory practices against the lower castes, and sometimes there is upward mobility, sometimes there isn't. We often have seen in papers of Hitesh Ranjan Sannal and Dipankar Gupta as well that yes, people, the moment they got a little rich, they would pay some Brahmin to declare themselves an upper caste or a bit more upper caste than they are at the moment, and they create fake genealogies descended from this goddess or that god, etc. That's how caste mobility always went about, and sometimes it didn't go about. And when it doesn't go about, Irfan Habib in fact points out that upward mobility is not there, downward mobility is not really there. There isn't even horizontal mobility, so you are not even changing to a different profession, even if that profession is in your similar, let's say, social status group. Even then, no one is really changing the profession, and no one seems to have a problem with it. And he says, why don't you all have any problem with it? It's a goddamn hierarchy. Hierarchies are unfair. It doesn't lead to equality. But he also points out that a lot of caste-based bad behavior was created or incentivized by Buddhists, and the two most common myths are the three most common myths surrounding casteism, I think, is, and all of these three are just myths and not the truth, but all these three things are three factors, these three claims are considered to be truths by most people in India and the world over, which is that casteism is bad. Of course, with that even I agree, but it was absolutely the fault of specific Hindu texts, and nowhere else did casteism occur because there were no Hindu texts. That's something which can be called a lie or a myth. Second is Buddhism was sort of a fight back against this system. Thirdly, Muslims also brought in the message of equality, and therefore Muslim kings, and therefore people could sort of got sort of a breather from the evil casteism and evil Brahmins, and ran away to convert to Islam the moment they got the chance to escape from caste-based oppression. And all these scholars that I just named have debunked all of these points, including Irfan Habib. Now, Sumit Guha comes in with a paper that we discussed written by him a few weeks back, where he points out that even the Jajmani system of Maharashtra, he's an economic historian, okay? So he points out that even the Jajmani system was not really based on scripture, Hinduism, etc. A natural socio-political occurrence, okay? An organic occurrence, okay? And he points out, and all of these people, all of these scholars are opposed to a person called Dumo. But you see, the fun part is that people who absolutely worship and lick the feet of people like Romila Thapar, Irfan Habib, because of their socio-economic or political explanations of temple destruction at the hands of Muslims, those same people, students, scholars, academics, journalists, politicians, won't listen to Romila Thapar and Irfan Habib at all the moment they say that yes, therefore actually casteism was also had nothing to do with Hindu religion per se. They were just socio-economic occurrences. Now, how can then we reconcile the two? How can we then say that yes, no, actually we also do the same thing like commies. We accept one and discard the other just because it suits our narrative? No. Recommendations to destroy non-Muslim places of worship or prayer, etc., have been repeatedly recommended in Muslim texts, and we see an evidence of similar circumstances in every country that Muslim invasion has happened in. Therefore, we can say that Irfan Habib and Romila Thapar were being naive to be polite to them, or were just being liars and evil commies who wanted to do a false equivalence between Hindus and Muslims, and therefore said that yes, just like casteism happened regardless of Hinduism or the religion or faith system called Hinduism or the practices of Hinduism, in the same way temple destruction happened without really without Islam having to share any blame. But on the other hand, we can see that that's not the case. Wherever Islam has gone, they have done the exact same things, and it's also mentioned directly in their books, etc. But casteism has also happened everywhere, even though Hindu practices, Hindu scriptures were not there to recommend those things. So it's the absolute opposite thing with casteism. So Sumit Guha, so the fun part is, on caste, everyone follows Dumo. They ignore Irfan Habib, Romila Thapar. Okay, they ignore Savarkar. They listen to Ambedkar for some reason. When it comes to Islam, they ignore Ambedkar. They listen to they show how evil Savarkar was, and they listen to Romila Thapar and Irfan Habib. So you see, it's a gigantic, elaborate system of pick and choose. And the fact that it's a gigantic, elaborate system of pick and choose, even that we are coming to realize only in like 2023, 2024. There have been, of course, I'm not the first scholar to finally, suddenly come upon this conclusion, right? Other scholars have said these things for years and years. No one has given a shit about them. They did not get a voice in mainstream scholarship, etc. Thank God for free market capitalism that we have something called YouTube today, where I can voice my opinions and a little more number of people can think and listen to these ideas than was possible in the socialist hellhole we were in, and we were essentially a Soviet colony up until 1991, where these informations could not be disseminated. So Sumit Guha points out and criticizes the Dumontian view. Dumo is in the camp of casteism happened because of Manusmriti, etc. He points out that one hilarious example that was there in the previous paper is that when judge-money system is gradually going away and people are feeling sort of a monetary crunch in villages, mafisal towns, etc., whose salary goes down the first is the local purohit. People start to pay him the least amount. His salary goes down the very first in the list of people whose salaries will now go down. Okay, so among other things, you all can check out that live stream as well. So this was a sort of a background gist and the context in which we are discussing this paper as well. And I have no idea what this paper claims. This paper, I'm reading it first and foremost because of this cool headline that I guess he's talking about Brahmins only, because he's talking about the clerical elite. So serving the barbarian, so serving Muslim kings to preserve the Dharma. I don't know if he has said this cynically, critically, or appreciatively. See, they did such a good job preserving Dharma by serving the barbarian. I have no idea. Let's see what he says. So the paper is called Serving the Barbarian to Preserve the Dharma, the Ideology and Training of a Clerical Elite in Peninsular India, circa 1380 to 1880. Let's check a bit of 2-3 comments and have a sip of coffee, and then we'll start. Hot TV is pointing out that Dada South Korea te दुम को emergency लेके जाए इधर 20 rank की करे. He is saying that इनको कैसे 20 rank मिल जाता है democracy में. The bigger question on Hot TV is that, therefore you see, not question actually, therefore you must remember that this is why personal self-defense laws must be liberalized and you must have guns at your home all the time. Also, Varna is a genius classification. What we need to fix is mistreatment based on it. And Varna is not even, remember also, this is something Irfan Habib said, that by Rigved mein jo Varna ka description hai, that has nothing to do with caste system or jati even. That's a completely different thing, which is, I think, something that there's one legit scholar, I can't remember, was it Romila Thapar or somebody else, that who said that actually Rigved is to be blamed for casteism as well. And Irfan Habib says, no, even Rigved is not to be blamed for casteism. He goes to that extent. Ninar, my counter argument to you in this limited scope and situation would be that there might not be even a need for classification because it's inevitable anyway. This is my libertarian critique of your claim basically, and I think the fact that influencers in the society came up with a classification, even that is inevitable, because that's what happens with prosperity. That's what happens with an advanced civilization. बहुत सालों से चल रहा है एक सिविलाइजेशन, वहां पे इनएविटेबल जो भी चीजें हो, अगर वो इनएविटेबल चीजों से दिख रहा है कि अच्छा ऐसे ही ऑर्गेनिकली हो गया, ठीक है, मगर इससे बेनिफिट मिल रहा है, तो हम इसको सॉलिडिफाई करते हैं या फिर बोलते हैं कि देयरफॉर यही करते रहो, सो उससे क्लासिफिकेशन भी होगा, इवन दैट्स इनएविटेबल. तो ठीक है. दादा साउथ कोरिया, sorry, the discussion you all had. Sorokin also claimed India is not unique and that its stratification was something that happened in all societies. Yeah. Yesterday Sorokin one was relevant on this. Yes. And Varna is not even entirely might not be a status based classification. If at all it was, we are not sure which status was higher, because it may have well as been sort of a horizontal hierarchy, but jatis are definitely hierarchies, but they are status based hierarchies, and statusism and different status groups are always there. We don't need to classify them just to create extra problems. I mean, for someone following Hindu ideals, wanting to know what is his place in society, he can think in terms of Varna. No? If someone Varna doesn't, they are free to be outside the fold. Yes, the misconception will arise when they base it on only and only their family surname, etc. Varna classifications are absolutely applicable if they apply it to today's professions and their position in the status hierarchy of today's society, for which I'm saying that if not the real Janeu, give out actual Janeus to PhDs. And there I have received criticism from even right-leaning scholars, PhDs themselves, saying that Janus were a great and beautiful thing, and PhDs are such assholes, even though the people who were telling me, giving me these criticisms were PhDs themselves. But my point is that, are you then arguing that no Brahmin ever was a bad person or an evil person? And similarly, is no PhD at all a good PhD or a good person or a good scholar? No. Janus were sort of a symbol of your qualifications. And PhDs also must have that qualification. And that's how we create a living, breathing Indian Hindu society, where our symbols are put to effect in the same ways that they were meant to, not as a fucking museum artifact. At the moment, all our Hindu symbols are museum artifacts. We don't use them in real lives. Unless we are now getting to naming our laws in Sanskrit ways. That's a start. I don't know why Indian car manufacturers or even foreign car manufacturers who sell in India still don't come up with fascinating Sanskrit names. What's the obsession with Skoda, Moda? No one gets the meaning of those fucking names. So we absolutely need Sanskrit names and stuff. So even those concepts and stuff. Kshatriya naam use karo soldiers ke liye, police ke liye. और ब्राह्मण्स वर्ड यूज करो, आईएएस बाबूज, ब्यूरोक्रेट्स, पीएचडी सब के लिए. और तब देखो वरना कैसे कैसे कहां पे होता है, और तब तो दिख भी जाएगा कि बंगाल का कास्टिज्म भी है. Janu means you are going to study Vedas specifically. Doesn't matter. It is about implementation of culture. Dada, are you going to cover invasions of medieval India and counter to Marxists on that? Aren't we kind of doing that already? If you mean specifically, then maybe not, because I have specifically other battles to fight. Our culture has become ornamental, yes. Okay. And you see, Neener, back then, Janu meant you were going to study the Vedas, and for Vedas only the Janu was given, because Vedas were the highest ideal we could conceptualize and think of. Today, if other people are considering some things further more important than reading Vedas, studying Vedas, meanwhile they're wearing their Janus and also getting their PhDs. So why not just admit that not everyone's going to prioritize the Vedas? And I'm not saying that, therefore, take away the Janus from the people who are actually studying Vedas and the Purohits and stuff. No. I'm even in favor of a different colored Janu, let's say a blue colored Janu for PhDs. But expert on any subject matter expert who has a PhD and a subject matter expert like an actual Brahmin in Rig Vedas, both deserve a Janu, because they are our cultural symbols which we need to keep alive. Interesting you say that Skoda is the only car company that has had a Sanskrit named car, Skoda Kushak. Nice. I have Nityananda Mishra for Sanskrit names. Yes. Tokens. Dada, how do you counter the argument of women wearing Janu and reading Vedas or chanting those mantras? Countering that in what sense? I mean, are you against that or for that, and you want to counter the commies who might give an opposite description of this? Let's continue with, let's start the paper also. Any thoughts on the Devdasi system? Yes, also inevitable, happened all around the world. Look at the film Troy, where Brad Pitt is there. Who's Brad Pitt's girlfriend? She's a Devdasi in the temple of Apollo. Serving the barbarian to preserve the Dharma. The ideology and the training of a clerical elite in peninsular India. Sumit Guha from Rutgers. The last 6 centuries saw the emergence of major empires that dominated every part of the world. This paper is from 2010, by the way, okay? Inevitably then, these impartial formations... Oh, I have not casted the paper here. Cast the paper here. Wait. Yeah. They also developed complex systems of governance that deployed unprecedented numbers of scribes and accountants, often drawn from groups culturally distinct from the military elites. Literati serving Western empires have been much studied of late, but the phenomenon did not originate with them. This article examines one such prominent group, the Brahmans of peninsular India, through 5 centuries. It explores little-known aspects of their professional training. It then analyzes how they rose to a dominance that persisted well into the colonial era and deeply impacted the contemporary politics of India to the present day. There is a significant and growing body of research on the early modern era in South Asia. The abundant records from that period have allowed a multitude of research questions to be asked, and a few have been answered. We now know a great deal about many aspects of the empires and kingdoms of the period and can study them in a comparative setting. In 1997, John F. Richards wrote a survey of the major empires between 1500 and 1800 and suggested that they were regional variants on an early modern pattern. He listed 6 traits as characteristic of these regimes and found all of them present in South Asia in various degrees. One of these traits was certainly true not only of Richards's Mughal exemplar, but of many of its contemporaries, which is quote unquote new abilities to mobilize resources and deploy overwhelming force. These two abilities were, of course, interdependent. Overwhelming force needs resources, ultimately in cash, but consistent and systematic extraction of wealth from millions of small producers and traders required a large, permanent, literate, and numerate clerical establishment. Collector Sahab. Judicious disbursement likewise needed close control and supervision. Both of these functions presumed a large cadre of lesser literati, trained in more or less uniform secretarial and administrative practices, and yet inexpensive enough not to consume all the funds they collected and disbursed. But this was not a national government, still less a Weberian bureaucracy. Ethnically diverse and polyglot empires often utilized distinctive groups for these emerging functional organizations. Equally, specific elites often colonized the emerging structures of governance and used them for their own ends. Across Asia, we may cite the Phanariot Greeks in the Ottoman Empire, Central Asians, Muslim and Christian in the Yuan period of China, the Persian literati who dominated the upper levels of the Mughal Empire, and the Brahmans of southern India. This article will describe how the last named segment of the quote-unquote service gentry, to use C.A. Bailey's term, became necessary for emerging early modern states. It will then describe how Brahmans established a firm grip on the lower clerical positions under the Bahmani Sultanate and Vijayanagar kingdom, and how they took on prominent political roles in the late 17th to 18th century. It will introduce the reader to a class of training manual or mestak that prepared Maratha Brahmans for their role as state functionaries, and will consider the legends associating these texts with a great Brahman scholar minister to the last independent king of Maharashtra. In so doing, it will offer a way of reading such purportedly quote-unquote historical texts from pre-modern India. The global domain of culture is everywhere a cloud of the subcultures of distinct groups. The global domain of culture is everywhere a cloud of the subcultures of distinct groups. Nowhere is this truer than in South Asia. This article will offer a way of locating the technical and ideological culture of a small but influential elite, the worldly Brahmans of peninsular India through the 5 centuries ending with the colonial conquest of the region. Scribes and records in the founding of states. By 1312, the Kakatiya and Yadava kings of Andhra and Maharashtra were compelled to acknowledge the suzerainty of the Delhi Sultan Alauddin Khalji. But it was only under the Tughlaq rulers 1320 to 1351 AD that provincial governors and permanent garrisons appeared in the region, so a standing army, and a significant Muslim population developed in a few towns. The portable wealth of this is a very important point, actually. Mysterious Sociologist was pointing this out to me. Remember this factor, guys. A lot of things are going to be now unfolding because of this phenomenon, okay? The emergence of standing armies. Before that, वो 300 के जैसा एक situation था कि what is your profession? I'm a potter, sir. What is your profession? I'm a farmer, sir. So now we get people who, when you ask what is your profession, and they reply, "Au." So, but it was only under the Tughlaq rulers that provincial governors and permanent garrisons appeared in the region, and a significant Muslim population developed in a few towns. The portable wealth of the old towns and temples being exhausted by repeated plunder, a more settled administration had to be built. Repeated plunder. Oh, plunder ho raha tha. Plunder. Under Muhammad bin Tughlaq, directly administered lands which formed only a part of the empire were divided into units of nominally 100 villages each. Each such unit had a headman and a tax collector. There is also evidence of a dual system in operation, with a parallel Persian chancery operating at higher administrative levels, often staffed by Muslim literati, perhaps supplemented by North Indian Kayasthas. In southern India, the more abundant sources from the Adil Shahi period, 1489 through 1686, allow Fukazawa to identify parganas ranging from 50 to 200 villages, each governed by a hereditary Desai or Deshmukh, who was evidently equivalent to the northern Chaudhry. So the northern Kayastha is equivalent to a Brahmin in south. Interesting. Localites were highly autonomous, and in many districts, the assessment and collections were left in the hands of hereditary officials. A segmentation of language accompanied this separation of authority. Segmentation of language accompanied this separation of authority as well, right? By the end of the 15th century, according to Muhyiddin, under the Lodi Sultans of Delhi, quote, although Persian was the court language of polite conversation and correspondence, the registers of all revenue accounts were kept in Hindi. Even the land grant documents issued from the chancellery bore transcription in the Devanagari script of the Persian text, a practice said to be prevalent during the times of the Lodis. Interesting. Adivan got my reference. Holy shit. the Mughal Emperor Akbar, 1556 to 1605 AD, however, was able to switch the middle and upper administration to Persian in northern India, though to northern India, though village accounts continued to be kept in local languages. As Muhyiddin remarks, this meant that there was a large body of local clerks already trained in accountancy and record keeping, siak. More, no doubt, flocked to learn these lucrative skills. ऐसा है human aspiration क्या? नौकरी चाहिए सबको. Persian came to predominate at all levels above the village. In India, south of the Narmada, by contrast, we find an increasing volume of biscriptural and increasingly bilingual documents. For example, a bilingual order from Burhanpur dated 1597 was written in Persian and then translated into a highly Persianized Hindustani, meaning basically today's Hindi. 2 secretarial endorsements on the back were in Modi script, used for official Marathi. Quote, endorsed by the office of the Hindvi Majmu. ये मजमू से ही वो मजुमदार सरनेम आया है बंगालियों का. And quote unquote endorsed by the office of revenue divisions, Mahalla, Mahalha, note the Persian plural. Then followed the Persian endorsement by the central Majmua office. Clearly, therefore, there were separate Persian and regional language establishments, and I would suggest that local communication passed through the Hindvi or Indian language office. This idea is supported by a document from Ahmednagar district dated 1627 CE. This is the sale deed of a house in Nevasta township, present-day Ahmednagar district, where the text of the sale deed is in a heavily Persianized Marathi, followed by a line in Persian. Dastkhat Qazi Akram bin Abdul Qadir Khatib Kasabe Nivasa Barhukum Hindvi Amal Numayand. The handwriting of Qazi Akram, son of Abdul Qadir, prayer leader, Nivasa township, exactly communicates the Hindvi agreement. This is the translation. Hindvi agreement or the Indic agreement. The Qazi was a local resident and knew Marathi, but also wanted to advertise his scholarly knowledge of Persian. Bilingual records would serve to insulate local authorities from central power by controlling the flow of information from locality. एक मिनट ये footnote पढ़ लेते हैं. Muhyiddin says, see also S.I. Tirmizi, who says of the Lodis, quote, the document is written in Talik with transliteration in the Kaithi script. The Afghan practice of biscriptural documents continued under Sher Shah and is discernible in some documents of the early part of the reign of Akbar. Okay. So, bilingual records would serve to, why bilingual records? Okay. So, bilingual records would serve to insulate local authorities from central power by controlling the flow of information from locality to center. Dakhani grew up as a lingua franca for the courts and urban centers controlled by the Persianate elite, but did not reach into the countryside. Rao, Shulman, and Subramanyam have argued that these developments generated a new style of vernacular narrative about the past. Karanam, official scribal, or Karanam, I don't know. A Karanam historiography full of concrete, though fanciful detail. Okay, next subchapter is called Knowing the Village, Rule and Records in the Maratha Imperium. By the way, guys, just let me know if you all are seeing ads. Okay, I don't remember if I turned on ads for the ad revenue monetization for the video or not, because if I don't monetize, this video will show up nowhere and will get killed in the algorithm. Oh, Kushal is also online. That's why a lot of my viewers are gone. Lol. Let's see if it is monetized. Might not be. No ads. Oh, I got ads. Okay, let me just check in 1 moment. Yes, it's on. Okay, let's continue. So, knowing the village rule and records in the Maratha Imperium. With the rise of the small but dynamic Maratha kingdom founded by the first Chhatrapati Shivaji in the 1650s, governing authority sought to penetrate the village itself. Okay. Control of information was central to it. Since Shivaji and his officials were drawn from the regional gentry, they could set aside the linguistic bifurcation between centrally appointed and local officials that existed under the sultans, where the small cadre of Persianate, often immigrant bureaucrats and soldiers, staffed the central government of the sultanates. Marathi was used at every level. So when Shivaji conquered the Konkan, he summoned the hereditary head accountant of the district of Murtazabad or Seul and demanded the records of assessments and collections. So the latter's response was that the Adil Shahs had simply made a lump sum assessment and his office did not write down the detailed actual collections. Those records were kept in the Sultan's Majmu Daftar, collection record office. So Mazumdar is a guy who handles the collections. He was reprimanded. He was told that, quote, "You call yourself Desh Kulkarni, provincial accountant, and do not write the collection and adhiars. The province's accounts are unknown, the peasants impoverished thereby. The province will become desolate," end quote. Therefore, accountants were appointed on fixed pay and prerequisites to keep records of the different subdivisions and the port of Seoul. The delinquent official was fined and imprisoned to ensure payment. The official was in fact telling the truth. Two different family genealogies contain accounts of Shivaji's creation of the village accountant or Kulkarni office. A memorandum compiled about 1766 by Trimbak Bapuji, Desh Kulkarni va Ganv Kulkarni, okay, so Gaon ka Kulkarni, began by saying that in the time of the Patshahs, his forefathers had done the work of Kulkarn. The name was not village accountant, but the entire account of the Jamidaras of the whole district of Rajapur used to be written by them. An original document from 1660 states that the Deshpande of the district of Tale went before Chhatrapati Shivaji and petitioned that as an order had been issued that the records were to be kept in measured units. Bighavni, Bigha se Bighavni, Bengali mein Bigha hai word. Records were to be kept in measured units, Bighavni. Therefore, village accountants should be appointed for the purpose. Six such appointments were ordered. This seems to have been the pattern through most of the coastal belt. The historical record of a neighboring subdivision, Anjanvela, as compiled around 1820, also reported that before Shivaji's conquest, the land was not measured and assessed. Instead, a lump sum assessment was made on the basis of the estimated crop and negotiations with the land controllers. This tightening of control was lauded by one of Shivaji's officials, Sabhasad, who wrote that as soon as Shivaji conquered a territory, he appointed a fiscal official to look into the records and frame a revenue account. Then he would appoint other fiscal officials to manage its affairs, evidently to check on the work of the first set. He is also represented as having all the cultivable land measured and collections monitored by his own clerks, setting aside the traditionally dominant hereditary officials. Oh my God. इसी से तो लोगों का दुख दर्द पीड़ा शुरू. Setting aside the traditionally dominant hereditary officials. काहे ये शिवाजी ने आके IAS काहे tweak कर दिया? Lol. Sabhasad goes on to claim that whether the ruler was Nizam Shah, the Adil Shah, or the Mughal, yet the peasants were hitherto completely in the hands of local hereditary officials. If the village yielded them 1,000 or 2,000, they paid a lump sum assessment of 200 or 300 rupees to the state. Breaking through this control of information needed more than force. It required the generation of yet more detailed records, and that in turn needed an enlarged class of inexpensive, so इकोनॉमिकली चीपली अवेलेबल अकाउंटेंट्स एंड स्क्राइब्स. ये काम कौन कर रहा था, उसके बारे में ही ये पेपर है आज का. The structure of the Maratha Swaraj that reconstituted itself after Aurangzeb's retreat from the Dakhan intensified this demand. Not only did the new regime claim a set of shares in an enormously complex array of taxes and fees, it also subdivided them among its commanders into a kaleidoscopically changing pattern. Furthermore, village accounts were also increasingly complex. W.H. Sykes described the complexity of village accountants under this system. Quote, W.H. Sykes says, the fractional apportioning the above taxes to the cultivator, involving the compound operation of providing reduced shares for the privileged classes, the fractional deductions in a certain ratio in case of remissions, the fluctuating amount of the individual shares dependent on the fixed commutation cesses being yearly visible amongst a variable number of cultivators, the mutable character of the Siruste Bhatta, customary enhancement, which Seresta, even in Bengali this word is today used, Seresta Bhatta, customary enhancement, which necessarily changes with the yearly varying total assessments of the village, and which Seresta Bhatta is not determinable until all other assessments are fixed, combine great evils, and unless to the most practiced, patient and persevering investigator, present an inextricable mass of confusion. Even if fixed sums were divisible amongst a fixed number of cultivators, the limited progress in arithmetic of the poor people would utterly disable them from determining their respective fractional shares. For instance, of 4 rupees from skins and shoes, 1 rupee for bait, gift on greeting a superior, 4 3/4 for ghee, 1 5/16 for a leaf plate, for leaf plates, etc., etc. In the whole course of my personal inquiries amongst this class for more than 6 years, I never met one Kunbi who could or would give me a detail of his assessments of their amount. The constant reply was, the Kulkarni knows. This impenetrability then needed unraveling by great men who did not want to see all their resources dribble away. Potentates, great and small, also came to realize the importance of keeping accounts. A set of edifying maxims prepared for the education of the youthful Peshwa Savai Madhavrao in 1789 begins with the importance of keeping regular accounts of income and expenditure. That section then goes on to importance of regulating scribes, writing clearly, balancing the books, and learning multiplication, division, and all aspects of accounting. Only then does the text move on to introduce such standard pious maxims such as obedience to elders and avoiding the company of the dissolute, etc. Okay, वो थोड़ा moral lessons बाद में आता है, पहले hardcore lessons है कि भाई ऐसे ऐसे काम करना है, ये craft है, craft सीखो, उसके बाद अच्छे आदमी कैसे बनना है, उसमें भी थोड़ा दो चार बातें हम कर लेंगे. This was the regimen recommended even for one who was raised to rule, who had scores of literati at his beck and call. A great deal of clerical labor was certainly expended in generating and maintaining records of all types. Anyone who visits the Maharashtrian archives will be struck by the immense number of minutely detailed papers recording tiny amounts of income or expenditure. One cannot but reflect on the huge amount of clerical labor expended on these records, with the obvious inference that it must have been fairly cheap to be so lavishly expended. For example, तो अब तब तो क्या था कि पहली बात तो यह है कि पहली बार ऐसा कोई डिटेल्ड रिकॉर्ड्स रखा जा रहा है. दूसरी बात है कि वो रिकॉर्ड्स रखने वाले का सैलरी बहुत कम है, तो तब बाबूगिरी का पैसा कम मिलता था. आज तो भाई और डिटेल और कंट्रोल और डेटा कलेक्शन बाबू कर रहे हैं, उनका सैलरी बढ़ते भी जा रहा है क्योंकि और भी उनका काम भी आई गेस बढ़ रहा है, एटलीस्ट ऑन पेपर. बट द प्रॉब्लम विद बाबूगिरी इज दैट most of their jobs are not even actually useful or important, and when they are supposed to in fact work really hard, work their ass off, etc., they are most of the time either spending it on useless stuff which are not really required for a babu to do, or the other times they are just not doing anything and taking bribes. For example, a paper in the private records of the Desai Kanungo family. Oh my god, Kanungo is a Bengali surname these days. So Desai and Kanungo are same. Oh, wow. They understood Maslow's hierarchy of needs then itself. Off topic, Rishabh Shetty's Shivaji film, the director Sandeep Singh is the Adibhan. I don't think Sandeep Singh is the director. Okay, he is only the producer. तो प्रोड्यूसर मतलब फाइनेंसर भी नहीं, ठीक है, वो सिर्फ एक उसका ही ब्रेन चाइल्ड है, वो सब हैंडल करेगा, वो फाइनेंसर ढूंढेगा, वो डायरेक्टर ढूंढेगा, डायरेक्टर के साथ बैठ के फिर कंपोजर ठीक करेगा, स्क्रिप्ट राइटर ठीक करेगा, उसका एक फाइनल से होगा. ही इज द गाय हेडिंग द एंटायर प्रोजेक्ट. ओके, जैसे कि म्यूजिक प्रोड्यूसर का जो काम है इन द म्यूजिक डिपार्टमेंट, वो है फिल्म प्रोड्यूसर का काम. प्रोड्यूसर खुद का पैसा डाल भी सकता है, नहीं भी डाल सकता है, बट फाइनेंस करना वो उसका फर्स्ट एंड फॉरमोस्ट काम नहीं है एक्चुअली. तो संदीप सिंह हैज डायरेक्टेड ओनली वन फिल्म व्हिच नो वन हैज सीन. वो सरबजीत, नरेंद्र मोदी एटसेट्रा, ऑल आर हिज प्रोडक्शंस. So yes, he's the one who's producing the Shivaji film as well. Kulkarnis are Marathi Brahmins, yes, sir. And who are apparently equivalent to North Indian UPite Kaistos and Kanungos of West Bengal. तो Kanungo का caste exactly क्या है? Bengali Kanungo का? Executive producer is more powerful, right? Anyone who visits the so one cannot but reflect on the huge amount of clerical labor expended on these records, with the obvious inference that it must have been fairly cheap to be so lavishly expended. For example, a paper in the private records of the Desai cum Kanungo family of Nandarbar, now in Dhule district, lists the daily food expenditures of some literate subordinate on a journey. On the first day, he spends 7.5 coppers on dal and 4.5 on jaggery. The next day, he buys a शेर. ओ ये टर्म भी बंगाली में है, ठीक है, एक शेर चाउल, एक mon चाउल, etc. So that's share. The next day he buys a share of flour, maida at 3 3/4 coppers, and also some more jaggery and a little ghee. And I've unfortunately forgotten what jaggery means. If someone can translate it here, I'd be happy. On the last day of his journey, he indulges in a few pennyworths of flattened rice, poha, cooked with jaggery. Needless to say, such records also reflect the deep levels of distrust in the honesty of servants. ये भाई वेस्ट का एक अजीब क्रिटिसिज्म है इंडिया के लिए कि ये लो ट्रस्ट सोसाइटी है. तो भाई हम तो ट्रस्ट नहीं करते हैं, इसलिए हमारा कन्वर्जन भी नहीं होता है. मगर हाई ट्रस्ट सोसाइटी का क्या है कि पहले वो सब कोई केल्टिक माइथोलॉजी में बिलीव करते थे. एक दिन डंडा पड़ा, सारे के सारे ट्रस्ट करके क्रिश्चियन बन गए. अब डंडा पड़ेगा, सारे के सारे ट्रस्टेड सोसाइटी करके मुस्लिम भी बन जाएंगे. तो अगर तो ठीक है, ट्रस्टेड सोसाइटी भी एक अच्छा बढ़िया सोसाइटी है. आई हैव लिव्ड इन द हिल्स, so even I have grown up for a while in high trust societies, so I know the benefits of that as well. But वहां पे भी conversion उतना ज्यादा ही है, इसलिए शायद. मगर at least acknowledge that high trust societies do come at a cost. So my point here is that even Arthashastra recommends that do not trust those government servants. Okay, that famous quote, just like you never know when the fuck a fish is drinking and ending up drinking water, even though most of the time you think he's seemingly floating around in water. In the same way, you never know when a babu siphons off public money. So needless to say, such records also reflect the deep levels of distrust in the honesty of servants. Good is jagari, acha, good. Bangla good. I see. I don't like good. I don't like sweet stuff. The Peshwas who dominated Maratha politics through the 18th century were themselves clerks who had risen to high office. They were closely associated with other Konkanastha Brahman families. One of the most intimate was that of the Bhanus, to whom Balaji Vishwanatha, Peshwa from 1713 to 1720, had granted the hereditary office of the Fadnavis or Fadnis. Now, so Bhanu भी एक caste है क्या in a way then? The Bhanus बोल रहे हैं, है ना? तो Bhanu एक caste है ना? Bhanu तो isn't Bhanu another word for the sun basically, S-U-N sun, Surya? And therefore I think Rabindranath's some family member also had a nickname of Bhanu. Yeah, Bhanu Koti Bhaswaram Bhavabditara Kamparam Neelakantham Ipsitarthadayakam Trilochanam. Of course, alongside potentates such as Janardhana Pant Bhanu, Nana Fadnavis from 1798, there were hundreds who toiled in the lower ranks of the scribal hierarchy, making a precarious living on the basis of a limited set of skills. We can get some sense of their numbers in the city of Pune from a record of 1788 through 89. That year, the Pune government allowed clerks in state employ to import grain from the Konkan duty-free. The list includes 154 names, and they were exempted from tax on 3,380 bullock loads of grain, or perhaps 300 tons. It is evident that many of them had large households at 200 kgs. Households at 200 kgs per person per annum. 300 tons might feed 1,500 persons. Some of these inmates probably also worked as unpaid trainees or umidwars in various establishments. On the other hand, householders also probably fed domestic servants and slaves. Thus, one of the more complex central bureaucracies of the 18th century may have employed 500 clerks. In addition, major office holders like the Bhanus employed large numbers. Who don't like good? That's anti-Punjabi active. Punjabi, yes. देवेंद्र फडणवीस, yes. भानु सूर्यदेव का एक नाम है वैसे, right? কি আর বাঙালি হবে? You don't like jaggery, yes. You haven't eaten. Yeah, I don't like anything sweet. I like only artificial, unhealthy, processed sweet stuff. Okay, like cold drinks and hot shit. That's my one flaw. Not among many flaws. Kshatriya Fight is asking, Dada, a bit off topic. I have decided to do MA in sociology. Nice. Which option is better, Rabindra Bharati or Bardhaman University? I don't think there's much of a difference. If whichever is more convenient to you, whichever helps you study more and spend less time in the logistics of journey or living in a hostel, whichever helps you study more and more. Okay. In addition, major office holders like the Bhanus employed large numbers. Okay. Janardhan Bhanu Fadnavis's own office in fact employed 300 to 400 clerks. This office was termed FUD and it or FUD. If any Marathi is here, let me know if the pronunciation is Fadnavis or Fadnavis. अब मैं कुशल मेहरा का pronunciation देखता हूँ तो वो तो हर कुछ में एक र घुसा देता है. I don't know if that's the Marathi way. Even though he's not really Marathi, he's Punjabi Khatri. So yeah, he puts a r in everything. So I guess this also ideally should be Fadnavis. So Janardhan Bhanu Fadnavis's own office, in fact, employed 300 to 400 clerks. This office was termed FUD, and it inspected all the accounts of the tax collections, military accounts, and Jagir assignments. Nana Fadnavis's clerks took a significant commission, one or even 2 months of pay. 2 months' pay out of every annual salary or emolument. Nana was thought to be worth 10 million rupees at a time when a foot soldier made 5 or 6 rupees a month. Rising income inequality. Khare's description is supported by documents from... Actually, you see, in that sense, it's not even rising income inequality because it's still better than the previous years. Khare's description is supported by documents from Furness's own records. For example, his accounts for the year 1789 through 90 opened with a balance of 5,13,138 rupees and 9 annas and closed with a balance of 6,94,202 rupees and 9.5 annas, income being nearly 3,50,000 rupees and expenditure just short of 1,61,000 rupees. Money never seems to have been paid or received without some levy for karkuni, clerk's fee. 1% was routinely levied from most payments. For example, when the government purchased camels from Dhomgir Gosavi, or when the soldiers of Musa Francis, uska naam bola gaya hai Musa Francis. The soldiers of Musa Francis were paid. I don't know if this happened in reality or not, but the phenomenal Chanakya Doordarshan TV serial, वहां पे दिखा रहा था कि अलेक्जेंडर का भी एक इंडियनाइज नाम बन गया, अलकशेंद्र. वो लोग भी बनाते थे, उनका सब ग्रीक वर्जन्स ऑफ इंडियन नेम्स होते थे. रुखसाना अफगानिस्तान में अलेक्जेंडर की बीवी, उसका नाम हो गया रॉक्सैन. उसके बाद से पूरा यूरोप में हर कोई सब क्रिश्चियंस, अमेरिका में भी आजकल लड़कियों का नाम रखते हैं रॉक्सैन. स्टिंग का गाना है फेमस रॉक्सैन, वो नाम आया है अलेक्जेंडर की बीवी रुखसाना से, रोखसाना. तो एक जो डिबेट है, चंद्रगुप्ता might not be Sendrocotus, but a lot of historians do believe that Chandragupta was Sendrocotus because that's how they used to distort their names or just greasify Indian names. Horsemen compensated This is Mystery of Sociologist responding to you, okay? Bardwan is better for Sociology MA and best is Presidency. So listen to him. Padnavis, right. Have you seen Delhi Jama Masjid? Imam has condemned the attack on Hindus in... Yeah. I don't know what's going on. Who is co-opting whom? Who is aspiring to come across as what the fuck? ममता बनर्जी, आईएसएफ, जामा मस्जिद, सब कोई अब बांग्लादेश के पीछे पड़ गए हैं. सीपीएम इसमें थोड़ा पीछे पड़ गया. सीपीएम ने क्रिटिसाइज किया, मगर उनके लिए बोला कि वहां पे माइनॉरिटीज खतरे में है, मगर यहाँ पे खराब काम कर रहा है. कौन कर रहा है? हिंदुत्व वाले खराब काम कर रहे हैं. तो एक के लिए नाम यूज किया, एक के लिए नाम नहीं यूज किया, वो एक प्रॉब्लम है. और फिर वहां पे कौन खराब काम कर रहा है वो भी नहीं बोला, सिर्फ यहाँ का हिंदुत्व का नाम जोड़ दिया. बट एनीवे, फन टाइम्स. 1% was, so horsemen compensated for losing their horses in action were charged 2%, yielding 247 rupees 8 anna. Even men dismissed from service had to pay to get their arrears. For example, the 154 miners and masons dismissed after the siege of Badami. When the Kotwal of Pune mulcted Tikaram, who was adopting a son, the great minister participated to the amount of 15 rupees. Moro Govind was entrusted with keeping records of tent fees collected in the camp during the campaign in Varhad or Varhad. He paid 5 rupees when submitting his accounts. Bigger sums were extracted from suitable targets. Hanmantrav Kavre succeeded to his father's estate and paid 500 rupees for the document of succession. ये एक थोड़ा वो inheritance tax जैसा है क्या? We must remember that access to government office was central to power and status in the early modern epoch. यही है पूरा का पूरा गेम. यही है आज का आईएएस का सर्विंग द कंट्री बुलशिट एटसेट्रा के ऊपर है ये, सर्वोपरि है ये. We must remember that access to government office was central to power and status in the early modern epoch. My question to Dr. Sumit Guha would be, when the fuck was it not the central, not central to power and status in which time? It was forever that way. Venal office was widespread across the early modern world. The state was in many ways a family state, as Julie Adams describes it. Venality and quote-unquote the associated styles of patrimonial governance wedded states to the political goals and reproduction of particular elites, as these elites in their turn tightened their grip on pieces of patrimonial power. The Bhanus and similar families and supported the Bhanus had support and similar families had supported the Bhatts, who became Peshwas. They shared in their power and likewise promoted allies and kin. Nepotism. The community saw the kingdom as their Raj. So, for example, Anandibai, wife of Raghunath Rao, who was trying to displace his infant great nephew from the Peshwai, wrote acidly to Janardhan Bhanu Fadnis that he was allowing Yavanas to subvert Brahmani rule, Brahmani Daulat. Now, next subchapter is called Writers and Writer Castes. ये कास्ट सिस्टम जो मनुस्मृति से आया है, उसमें से राजा मनु ने ये भी बोला कि भाई राइटर का एक कास्ट होना चाहिए. Yeah. Hi Abirjan, how are you doing in Bangladesh? We have won the war, narrative war in Bangladesh, I guess. Seems so. Even just yesterday, I saw legendary Bengali vocalist Poroma Banerjee, ex-wife of the famous legendary Bengali composer. Okay, I forgot the name of the composer. Lol. So Poroma Banerjee used to be one of the vocalists of Mohinar Ghoraguli. Mohinar Ghoraguli repeatedly had 3-part female harmonies. One of the women doing those harmonies was Poroma Banerjee. So even she wrote day before yesterday in Facebook that yes, everything will come and go, language, etc. ठीक है, but my country is my country. My country's flag is my country's flag, and I won't tolerate disrespect for it. सृजित ने तो धो डाला है, especially उसको धो डाला है वो अरमीन मूसा को, जो कि बर्कली कॉलेज ऑफ म्यूजिक का वोकल्स में ग्रेजुएट है. एंड फॉर दोज ऑफ यू डोंट नो, बर्कली कॉलेज ऑफ म्यूजिक हैज नथिंग टू डू विद यूसी बर्कली, बाय द वे. ओके, द स्पेलिंग इज कंप्लीटली डिफरेंट, बट बर्कली कॉलेज ऑफ म्यूजिक इन बॉस्टन इज probably the most, if not the most, significant and important and sought after music college in the world. So, and she's from Bangladesh. Then I saw even Srijato said that, even Srijato with his countless metaphors in his statements, of course, even he protested against this, that no, after everything else, all things set aside, I'm not going to tolerate disrespect for my country's flag. There is something interesting going on. Anand is saying this was true in South India too. Families looked at regions as their kingdom without any actual power or without conquering that region. Indian nationalism triumphed, yes. और अब है एक तो ठीक है, हम पब्लिकली ये बोल सकते हैं कि व्हाट अ ग्रेट यूनाइटिंग मोमेंट एटसेट्रा, मगर हम जो ये अब हमारा तो थोड़ा स्केप्टिकल माइंड हो गया है, हमारा व्यूअर्स का भी, ऐसे ऐसे पेपर पढ़ के, तो हम इसके अंदर भी घुसेंगे, हम इसके अंदर में व्हाट वर द actual real things pushing these occurrences. Okay, what things gave birth to this situation? Okay, if we have a Quigley, Nicholas Dirks, Irfan Habib sort of a mind here, Max Weber sort of a mind, then we must acknowledge that it was basically because of right wing BCom and STEM field kids from colleges and universities, and even the professionals who are debating almost 24/7 on social media for the last 4-5 years. उनके पुश के वजह से ये हो रहा है भाई. 5-10 साल पहले ये लोग कुछ ऐसे कुछ नहीं बोलते हैं. It's absolutely because of our debating, online debating army. सिर्फ उनके गालियों के वजह से हो रहा है ये सब. उनका हिपोक्रेसी का भी कोई तो सीमा है ना. वो सीमा अब उनको लग रहा है कि नहीं, इतना हिपोक्रेसी हम नहीं कर पाएंगे, हमसे ना हो पाएगा. तो therefore now they are in favor of, but the truth is, again, another truth is of course also that they are doing it subconsciously. Even it's not that they know that you see, I got so much gali from that young Hindutvadi kid, therefore I'm going to pretend to like my nation's flag. ऐसे हरामी पंथी से भी नहीं हो रहा है, मगर गाली खा के थोड़ा थोड़ा नज होके थोड़ा थोड़ा थॉट्स इंसेप्शन होके ऐसा उनके दिमाग में अब सचमुच लग रहा है कि हाँ भाई, मैं तो लिबरल हूं, मैं तो सेक्युलर हूं, मैं तो सेंट्रिस्ट हूं एटसेट्रा, मैं इस्लामिस्ट के भी खिलाफ नहीं हूं, मैं हिंदुत्ववादियों के पक्ष में भी नहीं हूं, मैं इस्लामिस्ट के पक्ष में भी नहीं हूं. देन व्हाई शुड दे डेसिक्रेट माय कंट्रीज फ्लैग? आफ्टर ऑल आई लाइक माय कंट्री. तो ये एक रैशनलाइजेशन, एक फिलोसोफाइजेशन होगा. एंड लाइक हमारे और एक हरामी फिलोसोफर रेनी जेरार्ड है, जो कि अंदर जाके सोचते हैं. ही पॉइंट्स आउट दैट भाई तुम कंक्लूजन पहले ड्रॉ कर लेते हो बेस्ड ऑन सम वाइब्स एंड स्टफ, एंड योर रीजन एक्ट्स एज योर पीआर मैनेजर और योर लीगल काउंसिल एंड स्टफ. ओके, वो बाद में तुम एक्सप्लेनेशन देते हो कि इस वजह से मैं अब मैं अपने देश के फ्लैग के लिए ये सब बातें बोल रहा हूँ. भाई 5 साल पहले कोई देश का फ्लैग वैग तुम्हारा कुछ नहीं आता जाता. तो दिस इज, वी मस्ट नो फॉर एवर, वी मस्ट नॉट रब दिस इन देयर फेसेस, but we must know in our hearts that this is a victory of the Hindutvadi online debating army and the fucking organic online debating army, जिसके लिए कोई बेंचो, कोई बाबू नहीं लगा. This is libertarianism. So writers and writer castes. The social history of the professional clerks, accountants, scribes, and copyists who generated the records has received relatively less attention than the formation and functioning of the early modern states, on which there is a large literature. Studies are usually limited to particular caste communities, and there have been some more or less scholarly caste histories, such as Kurva's history of the Dakshinatya Saraswats. Scribal groups also first attracted scholarly attention when they were the subject of caste histories. Ronald Inden drew rather uncritically on caste traditions to construct a speculative history of the social structure of upper caste Bengali Hindus. From southern India, we have two early and important examples in Frank Conlon and Karen Leonard on the Chitrapur Saraswats and Hyderabad Kayasthas respectively. By the way, do you all know, I heard this at Deepaldar's Bengali version of Bangladeshi Hindus book launch. I didn't know this. There was a speaker who pointed this out, that he was being sort of like us and mysterious sociologists, that देख के बंगाली हिंदुओं का कुछ नहीं होने वाला है, they're not going to wake up, give up, bro, there are suicidal rates, etc. But in order to give an example, he said that what will happen? Bengalis will either convert or forget their language, etc. तो language भूल जाएंगे भी तो क्या होगा? Like Kayasthas all over the country had a separate language of their own. It was called Kayati. No one knows it today anymore. Kayasthas have integrated into the respective regions they've gone to. So even in that same way, even Bengali language will disappear. Who cares if Bengalis, the majority of Bengali society is not going to care? We can't fret about it all day long. More recently, Chitrarekha Gupta published an extremely important work, The Kayasthas, a study of the formation and early history of a caste, in which she showed how various scribal groups coalesced into a caste category with regional subdivisions by the late first millennium CE. Some were perhaps Brahmin in origin. She also commented on the often hostile representation of them in Sanskrit literature. सिर्फ शूद्रों के खिलाफ थोड़ी hostile representation है. तो अब आई नीड टू पॉइंट आउट अगेन, तो अब डूमो वगैरह जैसे लोग आके बात किससे कर रहे हैं while डिस्कसिंग इंडियन हिस्ट्री, इंडियन कल्चर, कास्ट एटसेट्रा. अगर वो बंगाल में आके बंगाल का कोई पुरोहित, स्थानीय पुरोहित, एडजेसेंट पुरोहित लाइक ब्राह्मण से बात करता है, तो उसको वही मिलेगा कि हाँ, सुबह से शाम सब लोग मनुस्मृति पढ़ते हैं बैठ के, और उसके बेसिस पे हम चलते हैं अपने अपने कास्टिज्म करने. अगर वो हरियाणा जाता तो वहां पे जाके डूमो को लगता कि जाट्स रन दिस सोसाइटी एंड दैट्स व्हाई कास्टिज्म हैपेंस. मे बी जाट्स हैव रिटन सम अदर वर्जन ऑफ मनुस्मृति, मे बी जाट स्मृति वहां पे है कास्टिज्म. So who you are talking to, that also is going to affect your research. So Rosalind O. Hanlon also offers a rich account of the social history of this community over some 500 years and embeds past and recent scholarly debates concerning them in that context. I would speculate that some of the animus that Gupta notes might stem from the Kayasthas' oversight of the numerous Brahmins who had received land grants in previous centuries. अरे भाई, यहाँ पे कोई मिडिल कास्ट और लोअर कास्ट वाले हैं क्या? चलो पॉपकॉर्न निकालो, अपर कास्ट में बवाल होगा. I would speculate that some of the animus that Gupta notes might stem from the Kayasthas' oversight of the numerous Brahmins who had received land grants in previous centuries. तो ये कैसा है, समझ रहे हो? Okay, these are the new bureaucrats who have joined maybe in BJP's regime and are now poking the bear of the वो कांग्रेस एरा का जो एलिट्स थे, उनके अब प्रॉपर्टी ढूंढ निकाल रहे कि खोद के निकाल रहे कि हाँ सब लेजिटिमेट है कि नहीं. वैसा सिचुएशन है अभी, मगर है ये सब एलिट. If more recent centuries are any guide, many of the grantees would violate the conditions of the grant in one way or the other and naturally loathe the upstart clerks who would expose and consequently mulct them. Lol. As early as the 13th century CE, the king Ramchandra Deva Yadava granted certain villages to 57 Brahmins with the stipulation that they would not shelter armed bands, harbor prostitutes or encourage gambling. ये उनको बोलने का क्या जरूरत था? ब्राह्मण वैसे भी क्यों करेगा ऐसा? ये कोई बोलने की चीज है क्या? Sayyids, descendants of the prophet, whose status approximated to that of Brahmins, were also known to take irregular courses. Rebutting the charges made against him by two Sayyids, Matabar Khan, governor of the Konkan under Aurangzeb, wrote, quote, "The complaining Sayyids forcibly detained a Darwish fakir named Gani. On land belonging to him, they built a tomb purported to be of their mother. They called it a mosque. Actually, its shape is that of a small fort. They recruited a number of coolies and bheels. They reside in the forts and indulge in highway robbery. One day, Sayyid Hussain, without any cause, quarreled with the Qazi of the Pargana. He killed a person belonging to the establishment of the Qazi." देखो इन लोगों में क्या चुतियापा चल रहा था. Or to take a less extreme and probably more common example, the tax revenue of the village of Singbe, Nasik subdivision, had been granted to the temple of Ramachandra in Panchavati, Nashik. The temple priest got into debt. काहे? Brahmin priest होके debt में, and handed over the village to his creditor as security for holy shit. The temple priest got into debt and handed over the village to his creditor as security for the loan. The temple's income was consequently reduced. The Pune government discovered this in 1777 and dispatched a clerk to take charge of the village and see that the revenue was appropriately spent. It is therefore likely that scribes and record keepers who recorded and reported such matters would not be popular with the rentier literati, meaning the literate, highly educated people. As rebellious Tughlaq governors improvised their sultanates across peninsular India from the 1340s, they found ready allies in at least a segment of the Brahman communities of their kingdoms. By contrast to North India, Kayasthas were marginalized except in some coastal areas. Richard Eaton, describes how the routine business of government had to be conducted in the regional vernaculars. So the sultans, quote, found that the most efficient way of managing their judicial and revenue bureaucracies, both of which came into regular contact with village communities, was to employ those same classes of skilled, literate administrators, mostly Brahmins, that for centuries had served ruling authorities. Ab hum, since I am a sort of a Nietzschean believer in beyond good and evil, हम इसको सिर्फ ऑब्जर्व कर लेते हैं एंड मैं इसको ऑब्जर्व कर सकता हूं एंड चिल कर सकता हूं, हाँ ऐसा था भाई, ऐसा था. अब जो गांडू लोग या तो गुड या तो इविल पे बहुत विश्वास रखते हैं, वो लोग बोलेंगे कि नहीं, आइदर ये सुमित गुहा भोसरी के कौमी है, वेस्टर्न प्रोपागेंडा में बिलीव करता है, इसलिए वो ऐसा बोल रहा है कि ब्राह्मण्स ऐसे हर जगह में सब रूलर्स के साथ काम करने लगते हैं, या फिर कोई बोलेगा कि कौमी बोलेगा कि ये देखो ब्राह्मण्स हरामी था इसलिए ऐसे कोलैबोरेट करता था हमेशा. मगर द ट्रूथ इज दैट, अरे हाउ द फक कैन एवरीवन बी एन एक्टिविस्ट? यू आर नॉट गोइंग टू लुक फॉर योर जॉब्स. अरे भाई कितने हिंदुत्ववादी अभी भी यूएसए जाके बैठे हैं और जाना चाहते हैं अभी भी. क्यों भाई? तुम्हारा लैंड प्रोटेक्ट करो यहाँ पे, तुम्हारा धर्म रक्षा करो यहाँ पे, क्यों और कुछ क्यों कर रहे हो? वाई इजंट एवरी हिंदू, एवरी डिवाउट हिंदू अ बजरंग दली? तो since that is not going to happen, why shouldn't Brahmins take those jobs? But on the other hand, अब हमसे आके मत बोलो कि therefore all Brahmins were only reading Rigved all day long and had no vices in their hearts. Okay? हम दोनों साइड से चुतियापा नहीं सुनेंगे. ये फैक्ट है, इस फैक्ट से हमको कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है. तुम हमको ये बोलने भी मत आओ कि ये गलत फैक्ट है या फिर ये फैक्ट सच है एंड देयरफॉर कुछ बढ़िया है, ये भी बोलने मत आओ, या फिर ये सच है एंड देयरफॉर बहुत ही घटिया कुछ है, ये भी हमको बोलने मत आओ. That's the entirety of my argument here, and the kind of school of thought now Mr. Sociologist we find now Declan Quigley, Dirks are etc. are in. Okay, for example, just a clarification again, our criticism or claim that West Bengal is a caste society. I am not saying that Srijit Mukherjee as a Brahmin is actively preventing some Shudra guy from becoming a hero. No, I'm just pointing it out. But the reason for that is that, you see, in the same way that you, for some unconscious reason, just happen to not work with anyone other than a Brahmin Boiddo Kaisto, for those same reasons, everywhere casteism works in those same ways. Maybe the degree is different because the incentive structures in other states relating to castes are different. So you don't give gali to a lower caste actor and stuff. But by end result same ही है. End result है unconscious या conscious bias के वजह से. तो वो bias अगर खराब है यूपी में, तो वो bias खराब है बंगाल में भी. That's the entirety of my argument. So on the other hand, Brahmins certainly suffered widespread loss of lands, endowments and temple employment that accompanied the conquest. देखो, Brahmins के साथ खराब भी हो रहा है. यही प्रॉब्लम है थोड़ा दोनों साइड का ही, कुशल साइड का, अभिजीत मित्रा साइड का, और फिर वो ब्राह्मण्स डिड मेनी गुड थिंग्स एटसेट्रा साइड का भी. यही है रियलिटी. हाउ कैन ब्राह्मण्स अ वर्ना व्हिच हैज काउंटलेस जातिस अमंग्स देमसेल्व्स be uniformly good, nice and dharma protectors all across this gigantic country? How is that even possible logistically and for thousands of years? So perhaps it was more than inertia that brought them into Sultanate employ. So bhai, Brahmins are now taking jobs in the Sultanate. Chitrarekha Gupta's important study confines itself to northern India, including Gujarat, but she draws on southern records such as the Sanjan copper plate of Amogha Varsha. बहुत दिन बाद ये नाम सुना. I loved this name when I was a kid in our history classes. Amogha Varsha. This record supplies that most important information that by the 9th century CE, the Kayastha caste had not only developed in northern India, but regional groupings among the caste also came to be in vogue. Quote, the said inscription was written in Gunadhavla, who was Dharmadhikaranika by profession and perhaps Sena Bhogika by status. Status word use ho gaya. He was born in the Valabhya Kayastha Vamsa. Valabhya would associate them with the Gujarat kingdom of Valabhi. Acha. We read about this in history. This subcaste, however, faded from the record in medieval times, being displaced on the west coast by the Prabhus, who were patronized by the Silahara kings. These Prabhu Kayasthas began to play henceforth the leading role, ousting the Vallabhya Kayasthas from the scene. It is possible that for this reason, that the name of the Vallabhyas was lost forever and is not even found in the list of subcastes of the Kayasthas of northern India. The Prabhus were seen as rivals by the Chitpavan Brahmans. The first Chhatrapati Shivaji was reported to have ensured that the command of his force was shared between two Marathas, a Brahman and a Prabhu, with the idea that this made collusive betrayal less likely. Administration, good administration. Under Savai Madhavrao, Prabhus were warned by the Peshwa not to imitate Brahman customs and to conduct themselves like Shudras. Arey bhai, ये क्या है? Prabhus were warned by the Peshwa के ब्राह्मण का नकल मत करो, शूद्रों की तरह behave करो. The Prabhus nonetheless maintained a significant presence as a landed and literate elite, many of them finding employment under the Bhosles of Nagpur, a dynasty that was consistently aloof from, if not at war with the Peshwas. They also maintained a strong presence in Bombay and the Portuguese Estados northern province from Chaul to Daman. But to return to our theme, the disappearance of the southern Kayasthas as significant social group and their replacement by Brahmins during the early centuries of Turkish rule. Okay, Kayasthas को displace कर दिया Brahmins ने कैसे? Turkish rulers को serve करके. Brahmins during the early centuries of Turkish rule presents an interesting but still unexplained contrast to what happened in northern India. वहां पे उल्टा हुआ, I see. In both regions, the lower levels of the official hierarchy, especially one would expect the office of Hinduvi writer, were staffed by Hindus. Fukazawa's important study of local administration under the Adil Shahi Sultans showed the predominance of Hindus in his region. We may assume that they were Brahmins at that level. Central bureaucrats or havaldars, ए के ऊपर दाग दिया है तो हवाल उच्चारण होना चाहिए, बट वैसे तो हम आज उच्चारण नहीं करते हैं, शायद पहले हवालदार था. Central bureaucrats, havaldars changed frequently. अभय सिंह जितनी आबादी उतना हक. जितनी जनसंख्या उतना अधिकार. सेंट्रल ब्यूरोक्रेट्स हवलदार्स, अच्छा सेंट्रल ब्यूरोक्रेट्स को हवलदार बोला जाता था, तो आजकल हम सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट के आईएएस बाबू को हवलदार बोलना शुरू करें क्या? देखो उनका अननोन कास्टिज्म कैसे जग उठता है कि काहे हमको भोसरी के हवलदार काहे बोल दिया, because now हवलदार has become a polluted profession even though there is no ritual surrounding हवलदारी. Okay, बट वो polluted profession है क्योंकि वो हर रोज के मतलब गुंडे मवाली डाकुओं के साथ मिंगल करता है, तो उसका है polluted profession. इनका polluted profession नहीं है क्योंकि ये नरेंद्र मोदी के आसपास घूमता है, उनके साथ आसपास बैठ के मीटिंग करता है, चाय पीता है, तो वो अब हवलदार का तकमा मतलब लेट्स से टाइटल कैसे एक्सेप्ट कर लेगा. Central bureaucrats or havaldars changed frequently. For example, 18 of them held office in the Pargana of Y in the 32 years ending 1667. Out of these, 14 were Hindus, some perhaps with local connections. अच्छा देखते हैं किसके पिताजी किसके चाचा वो विधायक थे. Fukazawa writes, the overwhelming majority of clerks also seem to have been Hindus. From the names appearing in the Marathi records, we find that all the clerks were Hindus except the office superintendent, Nigavan, and the captain of stationed soldiers, Sarnaubai, who were Muslims. Third, at least some of the Hindu clerks, for example, paymaster and letter writer, held their office as hereditary property, Miras or Miras. G.T. Kulkarni confirmed this supposition on the basis of a different set of documents. So coincidentally, कुलकर्णियों के बारे में रिसर्च में एक एक्चुअल जीटी कुलकर्णी नाम का कोई स्कॉलर भी खुद कंट्रीब्यूट कर रहे हैं. तो we may link this with Burtonstein's suggestion that the importance of Brahmins for the Vijayanagar Empire lay in the fact that they were dependable agents of central power. Located in strategic forts, they served to balance the prebend holders and chieftains who might otherwise spin out of imperial control. समझ रहे हो किसके लिए किन किन चीजों के लिए स्क्रिप्ट डिफरेंट स्क्रिप्चर्स पुराण एटसेट्रा लिखे जाते थे to keep this entire system stable, ongoing. Richards has argued that many Brahmins were found as tax farmers in the kingdom of Golconda. The Mughal government after 1687 tacitly allowed this system to continue in some areas, but in general tended to displace Hindu elites associated with the previous regime. This process was in large measure repeated by the successor regime of the Nizamul Mulk Asaf Jah the First. So, central offices in Hyderabad state came to be controlled by a small group of Kayasthas. These originated in those who accompanied Asaf Jah from the north. Karen Leonard's painstaking study of Hyderabad Kayastha lineages shows how they quickly took over important offices and turned them into a sort of hereditary appanage. हाँ, ये सब मनुस्मृति पढ़ के हो रहा था भाई. ये अब तुम बोलो आके कोई. ये लोग सुबह से शाम राजा मनु पढ़ रहे थे और उसके बाद डिसाइड किया कि हाँ, एक बार मैं असफ जा के ऑफिस में घुस जाऊं, उसके बाद मैं हेरिडिटरी एपेनेज करूंगा क्योंकि राजा मनु ने बोला है. The widespread distribution of these late-coming North Indian Kaistas as far as Arcot shows how they leveraged their privileged access. यही है असली गेम. Privileged access to the incoming Mughal Empire to supplant other competitors in office. तो ये स्टैंडर्ड कॉर्पोरेट पॉलिटिक्स है. उससे 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 बढ़कर भी कुछ नहीं है, उससे हरामी भी कुछ नहीं है, उससे बढ़िया भी कुछ नहीं है. जस्ट प्लेन एंड सिंपल आज के दिन का ऑफिस पॉलिटिक्स है. उसको तुम इनएविटेबल बोल के मूव ऑन कर जाओ या फिर डिफेंड करो, नहीं तो गाली दो बैठ के अगर गांडू हो तो. But they quickly focused on controlling a few lucrative offices and never displaced Brahmins in the countryside. Leonard remarks how, quote, differences in the kind of political and economic resources the Kayas families controlled, record-keeping, military or household positions, were important to the survival of families and the transmission of resources to the descendants. The Saxena and Gaud Kayasthas, अच्छा Gaud Kayastha मतलब Bengali Kayasthas or what? The Saxena and Gaud Kayasthas were already beginning to make transition from wide-ranging marriage networks to smaller local kin groups as they secured claims to certain positions in Hyderabad's expanding Mughal administration. The 19th century began with the consolidation and decentralization of Hyderabad's Mughlai administration, processes that allowed Kayast and other kin groups to control positions through the practice of bilateral inheritance. End quote. They reversed the Indic norm of virilocal marriage by importing sons-in-law to expand their lineages and gradually formed a subcaste. The rise of this group of Kayasthas might also be explicable in terms of Mughal distrust of the Dakhani Brahmins who were so prominent in the Maratha resistance to the empire. But the alignment of religious centers, political domains and caste boundaries was also found for Chitrapur Saraswats. Conlon describes how Saraswat history, quote, suggests a pattern through which the code of a jati was formed by members of a few families in roughly similar circumstances with a presumption of common background. Yes, common consumption pattern therefore है ना, common degree of proximity to power है ना, इसीलिए तो वो अलग कास्ट होगा. इसीलिए तो ब्राह्मण बोई तो कास्ट मिलाकर भद्रलोक नाम का एक कास्ट हम बोल सकते हैं. The endogamy was not absolute because far more families joined in the connubium, you see. Yet, the separation implicit in endogamy was underwritten through obtaining recognition from the rulers of the territories wherein the jati members resided. तो आज भी status, since caste is essentially status, therefore आज भी ultimately ऐसा ही होता है कि maximum Brahmins Boiddos Kaistos end up marrying other Brahmins Boiddos or Kaistos. The Saraswats were of course not exclusively officials and literati. Many were merchants and other landowners. Important recent work on the West Coast Brahmins has been done by O'Hanlon and Minkowski, who have traced the networks that connected them countrywide and processes by which their corporate identities were defined. Here again, we see kingly adjudication as important to define and maintain community identity. Nor indeed should we neglect the sociolinguistic and technical aspects of the process. Gumpertz, who worked extensively in India, offers an excellent model of these processes. Quote, once persons are defined as outsiders, they are likely to be discouraged from learning or employing the strategies that make for membership. What a brilliant observation. हाँ, अब प्रॉब्लम क्या है? इसको हम कैस्टिज्म बोल सकते हैं. अब गांडू हिंदुत्ववादी आके बोलेगा कि नहीं ये नहीं हुआ था या फिर ये ब्रिटिश ने आके किया था. पागला चौदा का कोई हिंदी में बनाने वाला था. पागल चौदा नहीं, ठीक है, पागला चौदा कौमी आके बोलेगा कि देखो यही है हिंदुइज्म का प्रॉब्लम. Once persons are defined as outsiders, they are likely to be discouraged from learning or employing the strategies that make for membership. तो भाई इसीलिए हमको वेस्ट बंगाल के कैस्टिज्म में आना पड़ेगा. यहाँ पे क्या हो रहा है? Brahmin, Boiddos, Kaistos are making fun of people who don't get into presidency or JU, okay, or people who don't make music or films and don't have tastes that are really acceptable or applicable in Tollywood. And all of them support communism. All of them support some version of socialism. All of them support freebies. All of them support things that keep poor people poor, which ends up doing what? Ends up discouraging people from learning or employing the strategies that make for membership into the Brahman, Boiddo, Kaisto hierarchies or groups. You see, hence हमको बोलना पड़ेगा बार बार कि वेस्ट बंगाल कास्टिस्ट सोसाइटी है. It doesn't mean Srijit Mukherjee or Anirban Bhattacharya hates a Shudra actor. No, but in the end, you'll end up doing the same things, or the results of your actions are the same fucking things that you'd expect in a actually casted society. So the relevant knowledge is acquired in the course of एक मिनट थोड़ा कॉफी का सिप लेने दो. Anand is saying not just that, what you are referring is to common traditions. These bind communities stronger than just proximity. Yes. Job security. The relevant knowledge. Okay, the relevant knowledge जो कि लगता है उस group में घुसने के लिए. The relevant knowledge is acquired in the course of socialization processes that rest on informal peer contact, such as is characteristic of institutionalized relationships. What a brilliant observation. भाई ये कौन है गम्पर्स? इसका कभी नाम से नहीं सुना. एक मिनट ये गूगल करके देख लेते हैं कौन है गम्पर्स. What a nice, what a great caste scholar. He also seems to get casteism. Gumpers. Forrest Gumper. John J. Gumpers was an American linguist and academic. Gumpers was for most of his career a professor at the University of California, Berkeley. अच्छा, जिसके बारे में हमने शुरू में ही बात किया. What a small world. So, the relevant knowledge required, and that is acquired in the course of socialization processes that rest on informal peer contact. Okay, remember, not formal peer contact, informal peer contact, such as is characteristic of institutionalized relationships. Yeah. Why are most of my friends Brahman, Boiddos, Kaistos? Because I studied in a hilly area convent. उससे ऐसा हो गया. So, informal peer contact. Family networks are a prime example, but occupational ties, including academic networks, bounded along disciplinary lines, and certain types of voluntary association also qualify. Yes, it is because of the relationship of knowledge to actual participation in human groups that knowledge of rhetorical strategies can become a badge of membership. How are the above described population units tied into the society at large? One explanation is that community-wide power relationships determine the types of networks and associations available to a particular local population. We can argue that learning is ultimately constrained by the political economy that controls access to learning opportunities. Again, Bengal. Communists ने English learning ban कर दिया. सफर कौन किया? कोलकाता का भद्रलोक तो सफर नहीं किया. वो लोग इंग्लिश मीडियम प्राइवेट अच्छे कॉन्वेंट में चले गए और फिर यूएसए चले गए और फिर बोले कि सीपीएम ने बढ़िया काम किया है. What's happening here? Lol, ये क्या अजीब चीज हो रहा है? एक मिनट. Let me see Anand's comments. I disagree. We need to use in-group, out-group mechanics rather than just caste. Caste is ideological. The former comes from pragmatism. Oh, I'm saying caste also comes from pragmatism. We just don't know it. Last उसके ऊपर philosophization and rituals का एक layer चढ़ा दिया जाता है. Using caste says these distinctions were ideological, not erupting from self-serving pragmatism. See, your example of English learning again is not ideological but self-serving pragmatism. Yes, and this ends up being caste. एक minute. Yeah, and this ends up being caste, and especially since Anand, one of my main goals is to use the concept of caste as if it's an absolutely alive concept in today's context. Therefore, today's status groups are also going to do pragmatic things to do things for themselves. Where if I take into account your kind of argument, then I'll have to just stick to wo matlab the so-called castes, okay, which I am calling play acting and cosplaying, fancy dress competitions. I'm not even considering them to be those castes that they claim to be. Okay, I don't consider no matter how he hates other castes, or no matter even how he is oppressed, I don't consider someone who is not remotely relate or associated with an academic profession, IAS, PhD, Babu, or Rigved, etc., to be a Brahmin. So yes, for argument's sake, for I mean, just using it as a grammatical device, I'll call a caste a Brahmin, of course, but in my heart, I don't consider them Brahmins. So since I consider today's Brahmins, and when I therefore apply the ancient lenses of who is Brahmins and what are his duties and what are his actions, I therefore find things are absolutely similar even today, even in the context of today, who is a Brahmin. In that situation, even casteism, as I call it, even there I see only pragmatism and no ideology at all. Will the common person understand this? I can't spend my day thinking only about the common person, because otherwise then I would not be discussing research papers and discussing libertarianism. हाँ, कभी कभी कॉमन पर्सन का टाइम आएगा. देखो, हम भी ब्राह्मणिज्म का हरामीपंथी ही कर रहे हैं. हम एक्सक्लूसिव ग्रुप बना रहे हैं जहां पे हर लोग घुस नहीं पाएंगे. तो हम क्या करें? While the exact processes remain obscure at present, Brahman predominance in state business in southern India appears to have grown during the Vijayanagar and Bahmani era. Garcia e Orta was a physician who had exceptional access to the court of the Sultans of Gujarat, Kambaya, and Ahmednagar, Balaghat, and also held an estate on the island of Bombay in the early decades of the 16th century. He says of the Brahmins of Gujarat, southwest coastal India, Malabar, and Balaghat, Maratha Plateau, that they had higher status than the Baniyas and served the kings as supervisors of government affairs, scribes, recorders of land revenues, and ambassadors. Garcia e Orta spoke of the 1530s. So, Brahmins were associated with the sultanates practically from their founding at the end of the 15th century. Lol. Brahmins were soon to be viewed by the Portuguese as the major obstacle to the conversion of the Hindu subjects of Estado. Nice. अब हमारे थोड़े ईडनिस्ट हिंदुत्ववादियों का टाइम आ रहा है. चलो, उनके लिए थोड़ा आर्ग्यूमेंट्स भी दे दिया है हमारे कॉमी एकेडमिक. आई डोंट थिंक ही इज अ कॉमी रियली, बट आई फाउंड हिज नेम इन अ कॉमी वेबसाइट glorifying Dr. Sumit Guha. But even Sumit Guha is saying Brahmins were soon to be viewed by the Portuguese as the major obstacle to the conversion of the Hindu subjects of the Estado. Many were expelled, others more or less forcibly converted. More or less forcibly converted, भाई. अब सुमित गुहा भी बोल रहा है. Nonetheless, and yes, see, does this take away, अगर उन्होंने वो मतलब कोलैबोरेशन किया राजाओं के साथ, does it take away from their credit of preventing conversion? Or since they prevented conversion, does it take away from the harms that they did knowingly by behaving badly with someone, or unknowingly by collaborating? Because ideally, theoretically, if no one collaborated, it could be argued that they would not even run this country. Okay, that would never be fucking possible, but at least hypothetically, right? So reality is what it is. Nonetheless, even Brahman converts maintained their distinct identity among the nations, or nachos. Ye nacho kya hai? Thus, describing the students of the college at Goa, the Jesuit Antonius da Costa wrote that they were of many diverse nations, that is, Portuguese, both pure-blooded and Mesticos, Malabars, Brahmins, Canarins, West Coast people, Arabs, Deccanese, Bengalis, Moluccans, Javans, Chinese, Abyssinians, Black Africans, Caffrey. अरे ये क्या DEI के वगैरह ही ऐसा हो गया? How can this happen? Without reservation, these things can happen. Oh my God. Note that Brahmins are the only caste group in this otherwise geographical sorting. Fairly soon, the Portuguese were using Brahmins, especially Shenvis, as emissaries and negotiators too. Lol. अब ये पोर्तुगीज के साथ भी काम करने लगे, उनके एम्प्लॉइज बन गए. Francis Xavier also said it. Coercion is a real thing. Yes. If there is high economic mobility, there is less to no caste. Yes. And Abhay, you've almost hit the nail on the head. The final nail is that there has to be continuous economic disruptions after every 1 or 2 generations. Okay, एक बार आके 50-60 साल के लिए या 100 साल के लिए या फिर 500 साल के लिए जब स्टैग्नेट हो जाएगा इकोनॉमी, तब आएगा कास्टिज्म फिर से, कोई ना कोई स्टेटस ग्रुप के खिलाफ घटिया बिहेवियर करेगा, और वो घटिया बिहेवियर का डिग्री भी बढ़ते रहेगा. Brahman predominance increased through the next 3 centuries, despite occasional setbacks such as the massacre of the official Brahmins in Golconda Fort after the assassination of Madanna and Akkanna in 1686. From the beginning of the 18th century, Richard Eaton remarks on the entry of Brahmins at all levels of the Maratha politics. Observers of 18th century South, हाँ अब देखो मराठा नहीं, ब्राह्मण्स ने कन्वर्जन रोका, ब्राह्मण्स कोलैबोरेट किए, और फिर ब्राह्मण्स ने ही छत्रपति शिवाजी के डिसेंडेंट को बोला कि भाई तुम तो एक्चुअल क्षत्रिय नहीं हो, तुम फेक क्षत्रिय हो. फिर उन्होंने मध्य प्रदेश से ब्राह्मण लाके बोल दिया कि भाई तुम्हारा महाराष्ट्र का ब्राह्मण को हम बाईपास कर लेते हैं, हमको चाहिए कोई ना कोई ब्राह्मण का सैंक्शन, तो तुम नहीं करोगे भोसरी के, हम तो महाराष्ट्र से लेके आएंगे, भागो यहां से. तो no group is really a monolith except maybe one. Observers of 18th century South India 18th century South India were constantly struck by the predominance of Marathi speaking Brahmins in the politics and statecraft of the period. Are North India, South India. W.H. Tone, an officer in the Peshwa's service, wrote in 1799, quote, "The Marathas are generally speaking an unlettered people. This circumstance obliges them to employ Brahmins in most of the department of government and finance. These, from being the servants, are now become the masters in every darbar." End quote. This had political advantages. Yes, hoga hi. The English envoy Charles Mallet wrote in 1789 that the Peshwa possessed the most accurate information of every state in India by means his tribe, Chitpavan Brahmins, as intriguing, as artful, as industrious, and much more numerous than the Jesuits ever were. W.H. Sykes served as statistical reporter to the government of Bombay between 1825 and 1829 and travelled extensively through the lands annexed from the Peshwa. He frequently remarked on the illiteracy prevailing in the countryside. Quote, तो देखो अगर रूलर इलिटरेट है उनको चाहिए होगा ब्राह्मण्स, और ये हमेशा ही होता है, except I think for the first time in the history of mankind we are seeing a ruling class who does not see the value of the educated class. So quote, at present the little education that exists is confined to the Brahmans and to the shopkeepers, Shaitis and Mahajuns or Mahajan, okay, Mahajan, moneylenders. The Kulkarnis or accountants and village clerks are always Brahmans. Many of them are shrewd and very quick and possessed of an infinite ingenuity in avoiding the detection of a fraud or mistake in their papers. Many of this class, however, I found too stupid to keep an individual's account, much less the complicated details of village assessment. तो देखो वहां पे मतलब हरामी ब्राह्मण बड़ी अच्छा ब्राह्मण तो छोड़ो, स्किलफुल ब्राह्मण नॉन स्किलफुल ब्राह्मण का भी डिफरेंशिएशन है यहाँ पे. कुछ को बहुत बढ़िया काम आता है, कुछ लोग गांडू है. यही तो है ह्यूमैनिटी. Sykes also noted that in the 1820s, Brahmins filled all civil offices natives can fill, demanding a competent knowledge of writing and accountants. Is therefore you see, इसके बाद ब्रिटिश आता है, ब्रिटिश आके इनसे पूछता है कि भाई कौन यहाँ पे दादा है, वो बोल लेता है भाई हम दादा है, हम तो मनुस्मृति पढ़ लिए हैं, और सारा का सारा देश सुबह से शाम मनुस्मृति पढ़ता है और हम हमारे पैर चूमता है. तो the missionary Schwartz had also observed that most of the ministerial officers at the Mysore court of Hyder Ali in 1779 were Brahmins. Linguistic differences would also reinforce the Marathi-speaking Brahmins hold on clerical office, shopkeepers being generally people from Gujarat, shopkeepers being generally people from Gujarat, keep their accounts in the Gujarati language. In the southern part of the Bombay Dakhan, business was often controlled by Lingayats who tended to use Kannada. For example, the principal division of Dharma district in 1823 through 1824 contained 1441 villages. There were 150 schools with 151 teachers and 2,348 students. Oh, I thought everyone was uneducated. Of these, 79 schools taught in Marathi and 59 in Kannada. No, Anand, they are, Sumit Guha is talking about the Brahmin, officially Brahmin, legally Brahmin caste only. So now the Brahmins are shopkeepers and Lingayats are being called Brahmins too. नाम है Brahmin, अब क्या करें? So, shopkeepers being generally from Gujarat, keeping their accounts in Gujarati language. Of these, 79 schools taught in Marathi and 59 in Kannada, 7 in both languages and 5 in Persian and Hindustani. 1,313 students studied in Marathi and 1980 in Kannada. 1,980 in Kannada. Among the students, there were 649 Brahmins, 1,164 Lingayats, 64 Panchal craftsmen, 61 weavers, 65 Marathas, 48 Jews, 263 of other Hindu castes, and 99 Muslims. Anand Sridhar, no, but Lingayats don't identify with caste according to them. Yes, they're not saying that Lingayats are the Brahmins as well. Okay. Only the shopkeepers of Gujarat are Brahmins. 61 weavers, Hindu, 263 of other Hindu castes, and 99 Muslims. They were talking about being higher than Baniyas, so they might be talking about Baniyas here as well. Since that's not really an important factor in the context of this paper, they have not clarified it that much. Let's check out the paragraph once again. तो यहाँ uneducated Brahmins है. Sykes also noted Brahmins filled all civil office natives can fill. Competent knowledge of writing है, accounts है. Missionary Schwartz बोल रहा है कि ministerial officers of the court of Hyder Ali was Brahmins. Linguistic differences would also reinforce the Marathi speaking Brahmins hold on clerical office. Right. So there's no real clarification, Anand. The point they are making is that since there were linguistic differences, therefore Marathi speaking Brahmins were required to run the Marathi clerical offices. अब शॉपकीपर गुजरात से आ रहा है, वो बनिया हो भी सकता है, ब्राह्मण शायद नहीं है, बनिया ही होगा शायद, but that's not the point. He's just making the distinction that, see, since the shopkeepers from Gujarat are speaking Gujarati, the Lingayats are speaking Kannada, so there were no other people to speak Marathi and do the clerical jobs. Lingayats tended to use Kannada. तो मराठी कौन बोलेगा? मराठी बोलने के लिए मिल रहा है सिर्फ मराठी ब्राह्मण, वो है पॉइंट. सो आई थिंक द गुजरातीज आर बनियाज ओनली हियर. Lingayats don't identify with caste according to them. So during Hyder Ali's time, though they are classifying Lingayats as a caste, just like a caste basically, that goes against their own claim. But these minor distinctions are so critical to the larger idea that caste was clear. I see it more that some regions called certain characteristics as certain castes. Exactly. Remember that everyone was considered a caste. See, Portuguese people, Anglo-Indians today won't say they are a caste, right? But Portuguese Christians became a caste. Syrian Christians were a caste. That's how the people generally took into account any distinct cultural separate consumption pattern वाला अगर कोई group है, वो evidently हो ही जाता है endogamous, तो वो एक और caste है. तो everything was a caste, regardless of what they say today. Linguistic diversity created jobs for people. कोई कन्नड़ा पक्ष नहीं लगा था तब. For example, the principal division of Dharma district, ये तो हो गया. The great majority were taught only reading, writing, and simple arithmetic. It is likely that the implantation of Marathi as an official language in much of peninsular India gave Marathi-speaking Brahmins an additional advantage, and they were the ones enrolled in the Marathi schools. अब एक तेलुगु कन्नड़ा हीरो रोल करेगा मराठी राजा का. Indeed, Marathi was widely current as an administrative. Oh, और by the way, वो हनुमान का भी रोल करेगा, जो कि नॉर्थ इंडियन गॉड है allegedly. ऋषभ शेट्टी भाई कल्चरली यूनिफाई कर देगा पूरा देश को. एंड दे वर और फिर वहां पे गुलिगा और पंजुली पे फिल्म ऑलरेडी उन्होंने बना दिया है, जिसके बीच में जो जो फाइट था, कॉन्फ्लिक्ट था, वो बंद किया था। माँ दुर्गा जो कि अपेरेंटली कल्चरल प्रॉपर्टी है बंगालियों का। तो यू सी, ऋषभ शेट्टी इज द थॉमस एक्वाइनस of modern India. It is likely that the implantation of Marathi as an official language in much of peninsular India gave Marathi-speaking Brahmins an additional advantage, and they were the ones enrolled in the Marathi schools. Indeed, Marathi was widely current as an administrative language even in the Dravidian south, so that Persian, Marathi, and Kannada were used throughout the kingdom of Mysore under both Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan. J.W.B. Sykes wrote in 1853, the Maratha Brahmins who served Tipu and administered the affairs of all eastern princes are equally eager to swell the revenues of the English government, and whoever may rule India, he, the Brahman, fully believes that all financial affairs will be administered as hitherto in the south through those twice born, the Dvija, that speak the Maratha language. कि वो अब ओपनली बोल रहे हैं कि भाई राजा आएगा जाएगा, राजा जो भी हो, काम तुमको मराठा ब्राह्मण से ही करवाना पड़ेगा, क्योंकि और किसी को आता नहीं है काम. Finally, of course, we must ask why no Muslim clerical group took shape in the long centuries after Devgiri became Daulatabad. Interesting. See, Sumit Guha, when he wants to be sly, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, he can very, very harshly. He's saying, अच्छा भाई देवगिरी का नाम बन के दौलताबाद हो गया, फिर भी कोई मुस्लिम क्लेरिकल ग्रुप क्यों नहीं उठा? देखते हैं. In part, this may be because of the urban elite's strong ideological attachment to Persian. Wow. भाई ये बांग्ला पक्ष को कोई समझाओ. ये लोग पर्शियन करते करते ये लोग कोई नौकरी नहीं ले पाए. Whereas Brahmins were more flexible. ये तो मिस्टर सोशलॉजिस्ट ने कितनी बार बोला है हमारे लाइव स्ट्रीम में. वो फ्लेक्सिबल है, उसके लिए गाली दो या ना दो या डिफेंड करो, वो फैक्ट है वो कि वो फ्लेक्सिबल थे, और फ्लेक्सिबल होने से ही थोड़ा बहुत भाई हिंदुइज्म बच भी गया. So in part, this may be because of the urban elite's strong ideological attachment to Persian. जैसे कि आज हमारा है ideological attachment to Bengali language, which was not abandoned as a state language in Hyderabad until 1883 because it was associated with their own identity as Muslims and conquerors. So you see, this is the problem with language politics. This is a fundamentally un-Hindu idea. Equally, the literati may have had a distaste for isolated rural life. Some of this attitude percolated down. Sykes remarked of the Muslims he surveyed that they, quote-unquote, preferred the service of the sword, particularly in the irregular troops. Some few cultivate, but the greater part are manufacturers. At later censuses, Muslims were numerous among the Gujarati-speaking traders, and वो तो है Voda Muslims, the trading Muslims, the nice Muslims, and among weavers and other craftsmen. This pattern likely held earlier too. In either community, young boys would need to train early in the paternal business and thus be unavailable for a scribal education. The Bahmani and other Islamic states had indeed created an economic basis for a more widespread Muslim intelligentsia by endowing posts of prayer leaders and qazis in many towns and villages. These often became watans, passed on by hereditary succession, and their holders entitled to baluta fees from the cultivators. These offices were usually maintained under the Maratha governments, but their holders seem never to have rivaled the village kulkarnis. A learned Muslim wrote contemptuously of the hereditary qazis that to them, the registers of the Deshpande and the words of zamindars overrode the holy books, obviously. Rural Maulanas were largely illiterate and supported themselves as butchers. Achha. Even a man as eminent as the hereditary Qazi of Pune contended bitterly that his right to slaughter animals extended to the British military camp there. Next subchapter is called Scripts, Texts and Techniques. Dada, when the British conquered Bengal, the administrative staff knew Persian because the records were in Persian. Similarly, former Maratha territory had Maratha administrative record, and which is why Raja Rammohn Roy is touted by Bengali nationalists to be a genius for learning English, Persian, हिंदी, संस्कृत, एवरीथिंग. वो भाई हर लैंग्वेज उन्होंने सीखा अच्छा नौकरी के लिए, तो उसमें खराब क्या है? अगर अब हम बोलेंगे कि नौकरी के लिए सीखा था, as if that takes away something from his effort of having learned a different language. नहीं, उन्होंने बढ़िया काम किया, उसके लिए उनको क्रेडिट भी जाता है, मगर not as a superhuman achievement, but just as anyone learns English today. And Marathi was used in South India by both Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan. Good troll for your poor Kannada supremacy. Lol. Can BJP please read this line in parliament? बीजेपी भाई, मैं बोल रहा था ना, हमारे मनुष्य के इतिहास में ऐसी पहली बार हुआ है कि कोई रूलर को लगता है कि वो बिना ब्राह्मण भोजन किए वो काम निकाल लेगा. Shivaji Maharaj did Dakshin Digvijaya, freed temples, and many Marathi families settled in south. Yes, this last statement is such a burn for the DMK. Well, administration records were written in Marathi, so staff is obviously Marathi speaking. Yes. Hanuman was born in Karnataka, Kishkinda. Oh, yes, yes. We just don't talk about him a lot because Rama takes precedence, right? Hanuman is Anjaneya, born in present-day Karnataka. Yes. Hanuman is really big in South Asia. Yes. I don't think Bengalis got the memo. Will you say that Arya Samaj also became a sort of caste? Oh, Ares, remember what Irfan Habib fascinatingly pointed out about Arya Samaj, or even the Sikhs probably, I think probably about Arya Samaj only, no? That even when some group claimed to, let's say, stand against caste system, etc., they left the caste fold or the orthodox Varna Vyavastha, etc., but then they are later invited back as a distinct caste only, because they have by now grown their own consumption patterns and they are now endogamous, but they have a higher bit of a respect ke kyunki matlab acha, you had the balls to leave our system, you had the balls to say fuck you to us, you had the balls to क्योंकि हम तो वो मतलब मेरी डेजर्ट के कल्चर नहीं है, हम तो मान नहीं देंगे हमको बॉल्स के साथ डील किया इसलिए, मगर हम रेस्पेक्ट करेंगे बॉल्स को. So you had the balls to challenge our system and leave us, and then you also came back. Now you are a caste again, but you have more respect from us. This is the same thing that a few days back M. Shastri was saying, that RSS won't listen to you until you create a group that is a competitor to RSS. Then they will collaborate with you and even listen to you. And another example is, let's say, I forgot another example. I had another fun example. Maybe it will come to my mind, that people who leave groups and then come back having more respect. Okay. Yeah. I can't remember it. Ravidasis. Yes. Yeah. The another. Yeah. Aris. So Ravidasis. And same with Arya Samaj, therefore. And that's the same thing that happened to Brahmo Samaj itself. Brahmo Samaj became completely endogamous. They were from similar families anyway. They were from the same part of Kolkata anyway. And they had similar consumption patterns. Everything they did was done only by them in their groups only. So they were evidently about to become a caste, but when caste bolna became an uncool thing, which is why they didn't become a caste. But if the Brahma Samaj movement happened in 1500s and stuff, today we would have people with the surname, that the Shurojit Brahmo and stuff. Is the Brahmo surname something to do with the Brahmo Samaj? I don't think so, but maybe Brahmo would be their surname. This thing of Brahmin working for Tipu or Mughals, AIM uses this as casteist remark against Brahmin of today. As Ambedkarite, I see him. Then AIM cites Savarkar everywhere. That's the blind spot they have, man. And I don't see how. I don't know. Do they just try to come across as the fierce warriors against casteism, which all of us in this discussion platform are as well. We hate anyone who hates someone for being from a certain kind of family. But I don't get how can Abhijit Ayar Mitra not have read any of these scholars we are reading. How can that happen? How can he become a Dumontian when it comes to just caste? So I have a curiosity about this situation. So तो Brahmins did bad things by collaborating. तो भाई कौन collaborate नहीं करता है? AIM is just performative. Rudra surname is Brahmo Samaj surname, as far as I know. I see. Scripts, texts, and techniques. In addition, Brahmans scriveners had, by the late 15th century, if not earlier, erected a formidable barrier to entry in the Modi script, a cursive shorthand clearly derived from the Nagari script, but impenetrable to anyone who not trained in it. Training would probably depend on being accepted by an instructor, and so would run on family and caste lines. As we shall see, the difficult script was actually perceived as a valuable asset that assured the dominance of Brahmins in state business. A class of manuals was written to train those who aspired to make a living in that way. These were called mestak, and several specimens of this genre have been edited and published. The term mestaka appears to be non-Sanskritic, and so Raja Vyavahara Kosha. Where did we hear this term? In Sumit Guha's other paper or Nicholas Dirks's paper on southern India? Raja Vyavahara Kosha, I think Nicholas Dirks's paper. The term Mestaka appears to be non-Sanskritic, and so the Raja Vyavahara Kosha of 1676 provides a Sanskrit gloss called Lekha Paddhati for it. Many more have probably mouldered away now that their utility has disappeared. Let me begin by briefly considering the functional aspects of the Mestaks. A consideration of their literary and ideological role will follow, but esoteric tradecraft necessarily had to be kept secret and, if possible, confined to the family. Malche cites, Malche cites some manuals, a scholar cites some manuals that identify their purpose as for the purpose of being read through the generations by the author's family. Another manuscript was composed by Hari, son of Trayambaka. It was copied in 1788 through 89 by Vinayaka, son of Vishwanatha Lakshmidhara, for the purpose of study within his lineage and the benefit of others. Another manuscript, probably from the 18th or early 19th century, presents itself as compilation of the principles of Hemadri, the legendary Yadava minister and author of the Chaturvarga Chintamani. This Chaturvarga, okay, 4 varna or 4 classes. या नहीं तो चतुर्वर्णा ही बोलता, चतुर्वर्ग, 4 classes का चिंता करने वाला कोई. This is a modern early 20th century copy of an earlier document. It opens by stating that Hemad Pant or Hemadri, skilled in all the arts, had laid down how to conduct oneself so as to attain fulfillment in this world and the higher one. If by much pious action, punya, one had balanced sin and virtue, then what one would born a man. If the best of human births, that of a Brahman, had been achieved, it should be then made fruitful. That could never be achieved without the aid of a guru, and so he should be propitiated. Quote, once the guru's blessing is obtained, study should begin by tracing letters in the dust, multiplication, division, numerical valuation, terij, Steingas tarwij, addition, berij, and their aggregation presentation, kardan wabastan, and the appropriate headings for writing accounts of revenue and expense. तो एकदम simply डेटा एंट्री का काम सीख लो भाई, एक्सेल शीट वगैरह सीख लो. ब्राह्मण का काम है एक्सेल शीट सीखना. For alternate learning, let him learn singing, Sanskrit verses and aphorisms. Alternate learning, ये में भाई इसके बाद हम क्या और आर्ग्यू करें कि हम सही है, बाकी सब गलत है. For alternate learning, let him learn थोड़ा साइड में गाना वगैरह संस्कृत सीख लेने दो, verses, aphorisms, quote, single cool one-liners, the Sanskrit sciences and the Veda. If possible, let him learn Persian. It will be useful later. बाद में स्कोप है अच्छा पर्शियन का, मगर मेन क्या है, एक्सेल शीट सीखो. The Brahman's highest destiny in Kali Yuga was clearly to work in a Persianate administration. Fuck. Now Sumit Guha is trolling. Holy shit, this was insane. Many would have been simple utilitarian works intended simply to qualify trainees for employment in the lowest rungs of clerical hierarchy. हाँ, डेटा एंट्री का लोअर लेवल जॉब भी हो, वो मेन जॉब है. साइड पे थोड़ा संस्कृत वगैरह. 2 unpublished manuscripts in the Rajwade Mandala collection in Dhule clearly belong to this category. The title of number 49 of 70 among 829 may be translated Mestak of income and expenditure according to the rules of Hemadri Pandita. With Pandita. With a careful eye to economy, it is written in a crabbed hand on small pages of handmade paper pasted together to form a long sheet. This text dispenses with the legendary paraphernalia about its origins and plunges straight into the 2 major classes of account, regular revenue and additional revenue. पूरा बीकॉम चार्टर्ड अकाउंटेंसी का क्लास चल रहा है यहाँ पे, और बोल रहे हैं कि साइड में थोड़ा ब्राह्मण हो तो साइड में थोड़ा संस्कृत वगैरह सीख सकते हो, थोड़ा पर्शियन भी सीख लेना, मगर मेन काम है कि अभी नौकरी ढूंढना है तुम्हें पर्शियन गवर्नमेंट में. ठीक है, पर्शियन गवर्नमेंट में नौकरी ढूंढो, उसके लिए एक्सेल शीट पढ़ लो. रेगुलर रेवेन्यू एंड एडिशनल रेवेन्यू, ए इन Ain and CY, okay? Ain is revenue and regular revenue, CY is additional revenue. Ain Kanun. In Bengali, we use the word Ain for law. In UP also, people use the word Ain for law. I've heard some Muslims use it. The former then divided into that collected by the administrative officer, Namledar, and that collected through tax farmers. Each class of income is then subdivided into different heads. For example, 8 from land, 13 from customs and sales taxes, etc. तो मेरा ना ये ऐसे पेपर पढ़ने में सबसे ज्यादा जो मतलब दिमाग गर्म होता है वो है कि ठीक है, डर्क्स, डेक्लन क्विगली फिर भी थोड़े काइंड ऑफ ऑब्सक्योर है मेन स्ट्रीम के तुलना में, है ना. डेक्लन क्विगली ने अभी काम छोड़ दिया है, एकेडेमिया ही छोड़ दिया है, वो मसाज करता है. डर्क्स तो हिंदुत्ववादियों ने इतना बोल दिया है, डर्क्स को यूज कर लिया है कि अब वो हिंदुत्ववादी एकेडमिक बन गया है. मगर तुम लोगों ने सुमित गुहा भी क्यों नहीं पढ़ा है? इरफान हबीब के वो कास्ट पेपर्स भी क्यों नहीं पढ़ा है? Other manuals went into greater detail. Nonetheless, all these mestaks were clearly intended to qualify students for the lower ranks of the bureaucratic establishment. Bhai Brahmins ko dekho. Some begin with instructions to the preparation of pens and ink. Others with the correct way of tearing and folding of the paper and naming the different subdivisions that the resulting creases create in the sheet. Each such column had a name, and depending on the document, various items were to be entered in such. पूरा का पूरा एक internship का system तैयार हो रहा है यहाँ पे. Such knowledge was also needed to detect forgeries and also, of course, to carry them off successfully. The tone and terminology of these texts would allow us to infer who prepared and used them, even if we had no other sources. These were clearly produced by and for the Brahman bureaucracy of southern India in the service of the Islamicate rulers of the peninsula. We have seen earlier in this article how the centuries after the Khalji conquest witnessed an intensification in the recording and dissemination of information, and thus the need for an enlarged and renewed clerical elite. We will now turn to the legitimating myths of this elite. यहाँ पे आता है the part that fools Hindutwadis and commies. Okay, not Hindutwadis, trads and commies. यहाँ पे अब जो ये लेजिटिमेटिंग मिथ होगा वो दिखा के कॉमी बोलेगा कि ये देखो ये तो आया है हिंदुइज्म से, और ट्रैड बोलेगा कि ये देखो कि इतना बढ़िया चीज हमने बनाया था, और देखो इसलिए ये ग्रेट है क्योंकि ये हमारे टेक्स्ट स्क्रिप्चर्स से आता है. मिथ एंड मेमोरी. हेमाद्री, गंगरास पंत एंड हुसैन गंगू बहामनी. So closely did Brahmins shadow the rising power of the sultans, कि जहां जहां सुल्तान का पावर राइज वहां वहां ब्राह्मण्स का पावर राइज, that they generated common origin myths in which the founder sultan, often named Hasan Gango Bahamani, was literally the foster child of prudent and worldly Brahman. Intellectual people are always growing in the expansion of their views. He has not moved beyond his few bugbears. I have never heard of Sumit Guha. Yeah, हम तुमसे एक्सपेक्ट नहीं कर रहे हैं, मैं एक्सपेक्ट कर रहा हूँ कि अभिजीत, अय्यर मित्रा, कुशल, इन लोगों ने क्यों नहीं पढ़ा है, एंड इवन एनी कॉमी एकेडमिक. तुम लोग ऑब्वियसली नहीं पढ़ोगे. आनंदार इज वेल रेड, बट ही इज स्टक, सॉरी बट ही इज इन द पडल ऑफ इट. अरे वो उससे तो मैं एक्सपेक्ट भी नहीं करता हूँ. वो स्टेम का आदमी है, फुल टाइम रिसर्च में है, बाकी दिन कॉमिक्स को डिस्ट्रॉय कर रहा है डिबेट में. वो कब बैठ के पेपर पढ़ेगा? कुशल, अभी मैं, अय्यर मित्रा आर सॉर्ट ऑफ फ्रॉम द लिबरल आर्ट्स काइंड ऑफ अ रीडिंग, ओके, फॉरएवर एंड इवन नाउ, राइट? एंड आई एम सेइंग टू एनी अदर कॉमी एकेडमिक इन दिस फील्ड, वो इन लोगों ने क्यों नहीं पढ़ा है? आई डोंट ब्लेम Anand Ranganathan for not having read these things. They have come up with new ideas, not just regurgitated Western ideas. Yes. Sanyal Kshatriya. Abhijit, his mother is a Tamil Brahmin, I guess. Yes. Sanjay Sanyal, Anand Ranganathan is two. Yes, modern Brahmins, exactly. Mitra is Caste. We will now turn to the legitimating myths. Okay. तो देखो, अब इन लोगों ने मिथ क्या बना दिया? like Max Weber had said कि जब रिचुअल काम आता है तब रिचुअल बना लेते हैं. जब प्रैग्मेटिज्म है, जब वो काम फॉलो करना पॉसिबल नहीं हो रहा है, तब रिचुअल बैकडोर घुसा के एक और डिफरेंट रिचुअल बना देते हैं जस्टिफाई करने के लिए. तो यहाँ पे क्या कर दिया कि हसन गंगो बहामनी को बोल दिया कि वो वर्ल्डली जो ब्राह्मण है उसका ही फॉस्टर चाइल्ड है. आई ऑफर एन एग्जैक्ट एक्सट्रैक्ट फ्रॉम वन सच बिलो. लोल, हिस्ट्री ऑफ द सिटी ऑफ बेदर और बीडर. And Auliya Fakir. Delhi te Nizamuddin Auliya ailo. Let me wipe my specs a bit because it fell and took a lot of scratches because I was so excited reading this paper. An Auliya Fakir wandered down from Hindustan and came to the Dakhan to the subdivision of Miraj. Gangadhar Pant Deshpande then fixed a takiya for him and gave an inam of 2 bighas for a garden. The Fakir took a wife and a daughter was born. When she was 5 or 7 years old, a son was born. Then the daughter was married to a cavalryman. When the boy was 5 or 7 years old, the fakir mingled with the Lord of Heaven. Aha. Khude Bihisht. When Gangadhar Pant came to know this, he took the boy into his house and employed him as a cowherd. One day, when he was thus employed, he fell asleep under an apta tree, and a cobra emerged, spread its hood, and shielded him from the sun. Aha. A farmer saw this and called Gangadhar Pant. When the boy woke, Gangadhar Pant took him home. When the boy woke, Gangadhar Pant took him home and ordered that he be bathed and given the best of food and clothing. This went on for some days. Then the boy asked the Pant why this was being done, and the latter asked him, "If God gives you a kingly throne, what will you give me?" The boy responded, "You have 4 sons, I am just like them, the 5th Dharma Putra. You need not ask. If from your actions good fortune comes to me, you are the veriest father of fathers to me." Gangadhar Pant was overjoyed, clasped him to his breast, gave him the finest dress and ornaments, and began eating with him in the same row. Then one day, when he had learned the whole of Farsi learning from his Akhun, he set him to acquire Hindvi knowledge. When he mastered that, he was put into the gymnasium, Talim Khana. At gymnasium Talim Khana kyun ho gaya? He acquired those skills too and became a swordsman. Then that boy was given the name Hassan Gangu, and sugar was distributed. When he was married to the daughter of a Pirzada, and the wedding was celebrated in the way a royal marriage would be. The Pant had obtained much wealth. All of that was spent. Then Hassan was taken to the presence of the Patsha and introduced as a Khanezade, candidate for employment. He secured employment and distinguished himself. The Patsha fell ill and had no heir. The court astrologer advised that the royal she-elephant should make the choice. She placed a garland around Hassan's neck. Oh. In due course, the nameless Patsha died without heirs, and Hassan Gangu was elevated to the throne. The widespread currency of this story is attested by the fact that Farishta, writing in the first decade of the 17th century, heard and accepted the narrative. In the early 20th century, V.K. Rajwade then cited Farishta in his argument for the accuracy of this legend. Strong reasons to doubt its facticity have been developed by S.A.Q. Hussaini, even if we do not follow him in accusing Farishta of a Shiite bias against a Sunni monarch. Gangadhar Pant was seen as the prudent minister, as the heir to the great scholar Himadri Pandita, who flourished at the court of the last independent Yadava ruler and became a cultured hero for Maharashtrian Brahmins thereafter. Popular memory associated him with early medieval temples, which were popularly referred to as Hemadpanti temples, even if some were built well before his birth. He certainly authored a number of Sanskrit texts, and folklore soon came to credit him with establishing the set of scribal and accounting conventions that provided employment for so many of his caste fellows in the centuries to come. तो देखो भाई, ब्राह्मण भोजन कहीं ना कहीं पे तो हो गया है. And establishing them in anticipation of that long era of Yavana, common euphemism for Muslim, but also sometimes British rule. Rajwade was one of the early supporters of the Hemadri theory. He wrote in 1911 that Hemadri had established a system before Sake from 1240 or 1327 CE to 1328 CE. It continued under Muslim rule, but as the terms were translated into Persian, new terminology came into use while the system continued unchanged. He thus sought to explain how Hemadri could have been the origin of the obviously Persianate texts. This unlikely theory is also seriously propounded in the Maharashtra State Council for Literary Culture's biographical dictionary of Marathi writers, where he is credited with the invention of the whole body of epistolary and accounting conventions that marked Marathi language chancery practice, down to the establishment of British rule. Quote, no Marathi book written by Hemadri or written at his behest is now available, but it may be suggested that he had prepared a code of practice that stipulated how documents were to be prepared or written, how accounts were to be maintained, and how correspondence should be conducted. In 1853 CE, Ganpatrao Munshi, Munshi kahan hai hamare M Shastri? Ganpatrao Munshi published a book titled Hemadri's Complete Scribal Compendium, Hemadri Kruta Lekhana Kalpataru. See, this entire phrase is is absolutely applicable in Bengali as well. I'll just have to pronounce it as Hemadrikruto Lekhon Kalpataru. Yes, Hemadrikruta Lekhana Kalpataru from Mumbai. This work is in Sanskrit shloka in several. This work is in Sanskrit shloka in several meters, and the verses are accompanied by prose explanations. Apart from this Lekhon Kalpataru, many mestaks or manuals of accounts are believed to have been prepared by Hemadri. On this evidence, it may be surmised that a code of business for the entire kingdom was written by this chief minister in his official capacity. A more skeptical view is taken by S.G. Malshe in his preface to his edition of one of these administrative manuals. He writes, down to the present, not even a single Sanskrit work on the maintenance of records of income and expenditure has been found. Paper and other writing materials mentioned in the Mestak were hardly known in Hemadri's time, and all the terms used in the Mestak are of Persian origin. Bearing this in mind, it must be said that so also Marathi books of account were attributed to Hemadri Pandita in the same way as innumerable Sanskrit works came to be attributed to Vyasa. Right. Malshe's interpretation is reinforced by the fact that even the term Mestaka appears to be non-Sanskritic, and the Rajavyavahara Kosha of 1676 provides a Sanskrit gloss Lekha Paddhati for it. That term, however, does connect the genre to a unique document from South Gujarat, the well-known Lekha Paddhati, which I shall discuss later. Several examples of Mestak or manual Mestak genre have been printed. It is striking that they are usually in verse and probably intended for memorization by trainee scribes. One of these begins after formal obeisance to gods and guru, quote, bow to that crest of jewel of Panditas, whose achievement was supernatural, who truly understood this world. He knew that perverse conduct would come in the Kali Yuga. The twice born, the Dvija, would have no respect for learning, and kingship be held by ill-conducted Yavanas. ये predict कर रहा था वो. With yoga and sacrifice uprooted, where would the conduct and performance of rituals be? The four Varna distinction would hardly be maintained. The noble would serve the base. Only then could Varna distinction survive. Such impiety was to come. Knowing in his mind that Brahmans would have to serve mlechas, he, Hemadri, by his grace, compounded a remedy. He sought some device to ensure that serving the base should not produce abasement. That pride in one's own dharma might live. Okay? तो ये एक ब्रिलियंट जस्टिफिकेशन बनाया जा रहा है कि देखो अब ऐसा है कि कलयुग आ गया है, सब कोई म्लेच्छों को सर्व करने लग गए हैं, मगर उससे तो तुम्हारा खुद का भी रिचुअल पोल्यूशन हो जाएगा. तो हेमाद्री यहाँ पे या फिर हेमाद्री के शोल्डर पे रख के बंदूक चला जाता है कि देखो, सो व्हाट इज अ रिचुअल बैकडोर इन दिस सिचुएशन देन, कि हम म्लेच्छा को भी सर्व भी करेंगे मगर हमारा रिचुअल पोल्यूशन नहीं होगा. सो Hemadri, by his grace, compounded a remedy. He sought some device to ensure that serving the base should not produce abasement, that pride in one's own dharma might live. So, he devised the unprecedented demonic script, whose importance benefits the Vipra, the Brahman. Such a far-seeing person was he, whose name was Hemadri, who provided fulfillment for the desires of Brahmans. With a full prostration to him does this book begin, and seeks the indulgence of all scribes. Just as the Sutra, Karika, and Pramana guide in religious conduct, so does this Mestak in scribecraft. Two are the places of service, postings in the king's presence and postings elsewhere. Of the two, the superior is service in the presence, or Huzrati. Vedic knowledge shines best when illuminated by the lamp of power. It is surprisingly dimmed by distance. Oh, fuck. Proximity to power is everything again. Declan quickly stands. Vindicated. Nicholas Dirks. All the greats we have been studying for the last 1 year. This is it. Again. तो वेद भाई जंगल में पढ़ने से उतना मजा नहीं है. राजा के आसपास थोड़ा घूमो फिरो भाई. आईएएस डिस्ट्रिक्ट मैजिस्ट्रेट छपरा में बैठ के क्या होगा? अगर मोदी के आसपास थोड़ा सेक्रेटरी वेक्रेटरी बन पाओ तब ना कोई मजा है, तब ना जाके तुम्हारा यूपीएससी के लिए उतना यू नो हाउ मच माय फादर स्टडीड फॉर यूपीएससी, वो सब काम आएगा। काम तो भाई ये लैंप ऑफ पावर के आसपास ही काम आएगा। ओफ, होली शिट, द ह्यूमैनिटी इज एग्जैक्टली द सेम। इट इज सरप्राइजिंगली डिम्ड बाय डिस्टेंस। ओके, वैदिक नॉलेज गेट्स डिम्ड बाय डिस्टेंस। ये हम नहीं बोल रहे हैं, ये तो ये लोग बोल रहे हैं। Occasional passages in Sanskrit prose and verse, for example, the well-known verse declaring the king to be an avatar of Vishnu, are interpolated. Thus, the opening chapter is given a Sanskrit ending. Thus ends the chapter written by Sri Hemadri Pandita on the skillful use of the demonic script. Another manuscript was published by Sri Kanderlal Attar or Attar in the proceedings of the BIS Mandala for 1915 through 16. The copy had been made at Athni in northern Karnataka in 1777 through 78. It declared itself to be the Hemapanti Mestak, or rather an expanded rendition into Prakrit, that is Marathi, from Sankratu, Sanskrit. देखते हैं यहाँ पे क्या बोला जा रहा है। Quote, it has been written out clearly to make it easy for the ignorant, जो कि आनंद श्रीधर हमको पढ़ने को बोल रहा था। It has been written out clearly to make it easy for the ignorant. It is respectfully offered to the skillful reader. The one who is lazy in reading and writing know that the fool will definitely fail. हम क्या करें? Misfortune and dullness are the sons of ignorance. No, सप्तर्षि, यहाँ पे सिर्फ स्प्रेडिंग का बात नहीं हो रहा है। यहाँ पे ब्लैंकेट ये बोला जा रहा है कि वैदिक लर्निंग का, वैदिक विजडम का ही उतना वैल्यू नहीं है। You can of course expose fact to justify it, saying they mean that yes, without some state power you can't spread it. So, but they are not mentioning the phenomenon of spreading the knowledge. They are saying inherently the value of Vedas is less unless it has proximity to power. Of course, not all mestaks, not all mestaks had the literary flourishes of these printed ones. Editors probably selected them for their unusual qualities. But on the other hand, we also have elaborate literary exercises that well exceeded instructional needs. One of these is the Sanskrit Lekha Paddhati from Gujarat. This well-known work was completed at the end of the 15th century and ever been composed in Sanskrit, and offered Sanskrit models for a range of texts, some of which had never probably ever been composed in Sanskrit, as for example dunning notes, receipts, sale deeds and bills of exchange, hundi. On the other hand, the editors of the text comment on the poor quality of the Sanskrit which is often inflected with Gujarati. Lol. It is also possible that, you see, they were also against good Jews. It is also possible that the manuscript reflected an effort of the poorer Sanskrit literati under the later sultans to insinuate themselves into the emerging clerical administration of Gujarat. If so, the effort did not succeed. I am not aware that any of these formats were ever actually employed in practical contexts, whereas we have thousands of Marathi texts employing terms and forms prescribed in the mestaks. The Lekha Paddhati therefore resembles a much later text, the ornate Lekhana Kalpataru, printed from Mumbai in 1853. This latter text is Marathi, and some of its documents resemble somewhat ornate versions of actual 18th century documents. Others reflect the particular concerns of the Maharashtrian Brahmans, as for example, forms of address to important members of lower castes unworthy of full obeisance. Vedic knowledge shines best when illuminated by lamp of power. A long section is devoted to forms of address to Yavanas, etc., Yavanadika. This was for use when Yavanas or Muslims were seniors, gurus, employers, Yajmana, people of standing, soldiers, brothers, social equals, sons, servants, etc. Baapre. Muslims ab gurus, employers, sab ban gaye, Yajman. All of these in mixed Parsi and Maharashtra in best, middling and lowest modes, letters of different sorts with their headers, and besides this to Qazis, Kotwals, Maulvis, etc., and loan documents, sureties, depositions, etc., all are given below. This text is clearly modeled on by the then numerous Persian Insha collections. Insha का मतलब क्या है? इंशा अल्लाह का क्या ये वही इंशा है क्या? Inshallah means by God, right? Or No, I don't know the meaning of inshallah. In this text is clearly modeled on by the then numerous Persian Insha collections. Perhaps its growing irrelevance in the world of an anglicizing colonial bureaucracy led to the baroque and fanciful overgrowth of its content. Less than 2 decades later, official formats were firmly fixed by Theodore C. Hope's book called Manual of Revenue Accounts. Let us now return to earlier and more functional examples of the genre. Even these have elements of literary excess. Take the fine example edited by S.G. Malshe. This text begins with a Sanskrit header, obeisance to Ganesha, now the beginning of the text on expertise. Then it switches into Marathi verse. Lol. Acha. Sanskrit headline karke Marathi mein ghus gaye, theek hai. The manual of Shanopana, bow first to Ganapati, then salute Saraswati and begin work. The wise father should take his son with him and instruct him in all business. Teach him to write clearly and to prepare to paper. Do not even dream of leaving him untrained. The wisest will get him married him early and make him grow up well educated. Having calculated an auspicious moment on a good day and bowed to the remover of obstacles, let this study begin. Make a pen of boar wood if that is unavailable. Then of the thorn tree use no other. Sanskrit verse says, in yellow there is abundant wealth, but in red there lies poverty. Well cut, pale and auspicious is the good pen. This verse is then followed by a Marathi explanation. It means, if the boar twig is yellow, then good fortune will ensue. But know that red will bring desperate poverty at all times. The white boar will be greatly beneficial, but the black brings endless ill. End quote. This pattern of Sanskrit verse and extended Marathi gloss is maintained throughout the text, though considerable portions of the Marathi bear no particular relation to the Sanskrit verse. Why would the author burden himself with the labor of composing or locating these Sanskrit verses which have no pragmatic purpose? I suggest that this is an that is an attempt to sacralize, okay, meaning make it sacred, okay. थोड़ा validation दो, sanction दो इनको, एक मतलब जात में उठाओ उस टेक्स्ट को संस्कृत यूज करके. जैसे कि आज अगर कोई किसी का बुक इंग्लिश में नहीं निकलता है तो वो फुली उसको रेस्पेक्ट नहीं मिलेगा among the educated masses of India. I suggest that this is an attempt to sacralize the scribal function and to treat it as not inferior to the traditional Brahmanical role. देखो भाई हमको भी संस्कृत आता है इसलिए यहाँ वहाँ संस्कृत घुसा दिया, just to call themselves equivalent to the usual Brahmin role. Okay, हम थोड़ा संस्कृत adjacent कुछ ना कुछ काम कर रहे हैं वो vibe देने के लिए. We may recollect the point made in Rajwade's Mestak. Quote, just as the Sutra, Karika, Pramana guide in religious conduct, so does this Mestak in scribecraft. So, एक equivalence parallel draw करने की कोशिश. As Brahmans claimed and to a large extent maintained a monopoly of Sanskrit and sacred learning, I suggest that these allusions sought to present the concerns of this world as well as also a part of their dharma. Okay, explanation चल रहा है हमेशा, justification. This then dealt with a personal unease and societal reproach at Brahman's closeness to Mleccha rulers and their involvement in worldly affairs. हाँ, ये देखो आसपास में लोगों को तो कंसर्न हो रहा है कि भाई म्लेच्छों को सर्व कर रहा है, वर्ल्डली अफेयर के लिए बिजी हो रहा है, तो ये काहे का ब्राह्मण? So that people don't end up saying those things, or so that everyone doesn't become Pirali Brahmins like Rabindranath's family. Therefore, they come up with these justifications and play their Sanskrit adjacent Brahmin-like vibes. Such critiques were current. For example, a long poem by a devotee of Tukaram castigates Brahmins for abandoning traditional rites of Homa and Yajna. तो ये भी थोड़ा डुमोंशियन व्यू है. उनको नहीं समझ में आया कि ब्राह्मण्स का जो पहले काम था इन अ वे वो ही कर रहे थे. हमको ये इससे कोई गुस्सा नहीं आ रहा है कि ब्राह्मण्स क्यों कर रहे थे. ट्रेड्स को याद दिलाना है कि भाई देखो काम, सोसाइटी, इकोनॉमी इवॉल्व हो गया, उनका प्रोफेशन इवॉल्व हो गया, मगर प्रोफेशन का जो the kind of profession Brahmins were in back then, they were doing the same kind of profession even in a later stage. They were just not doing Homa and Yoga specifically. Malshe suggests that this is related to the Brahman surname or title Shenvi and derives from a Sanskrit compound meaning instructor. This seems implausible given the context of the text. A more direct link to court bureaucracy would be a derivation from Indo-Persian Shahana, superintendent, Steingas, Persian English dictionary. अच्छा ठीक है. Shahana means सुपरिंटेंडेंट. तो शाहना गोस्वामी, शाहना वाजपेयी, ये कैसा नाम है भाई? Homa and Yoga. Yeah, so giving up the practices of Homa and Yajna का है. For dishonestly practicing the trades pertaining to all 18 castes, for finding the Veda and Samhita distasteful and abandoning them, giving up pure white clothing and donning blue garments, etc. कैसे किए, कैसे कर लिए ये सब? The Brahmins would especially be vulnerable to the charge that they worshipped the slippers of lechas in order to fill their stomachs. After all, their claim to superiority depended precisely on purity of conduct and contact. यही देखो, खुद का बनाया हुआ गड्ढे में खुद घुस गया. तो खुद बोला था कि देखो हमारा तो प्योर प्रोफेशन है, तुमका भाई चुतिया वो रिचुअली इम्प्योर प्रोफेशन है. अब खुद करेंगे, अब उसका रिचुअल बैकडोर ढूंढना पड़ेगा, क्या करें. मगर सबको समझना पड़ेगा कि स्टेटस है ये. Yet revenue administration involved the risk of public flogging and consequent pollution. Public flogging भी हो जाएगा शायद. Shit. The revered C.F. Schwartz was sent as an envoy to the court of Hyder Ali in 1779. One evening he saw a group of evidently fearful district officials sitting in the courtyard. Quote, "They appeared to me like people condemned to death. Few are able to render their accounts to Hyder's satisfaction, and hence dreadful punishments take place daily." अगर मार पड़ गई तब तो हमारा रिचुअल पोल्यूशन हो गया. I am hardly sure if I ought to mention how one of these official servants was punished. The poor man was bound. 2 persons approached with whips and mangled him shockingly. But notwithstanding these punishments are so severe, there are people enough who seek these offices. The Brahmins are the worst. When they have a district, they flay the people most cruelly, and then at last pretending they were poor, they receive Hyder's chastisement and then return to their district. Shit. Normal Haramipanti. I suggest that the Mestak writers then sought to diffuse this threat in several ways. So remember this then. Okay, ये Mestak ही है justification. That's such a commie argument, Rafal. Which one? Faith has limited with a sorry, but it's lame when it comes from the mouth of a commie. All right, which one, Anand? I suggest that the Mestak writers then sought to diffuse this threat in several ways. One was to present the text as equivalent to time-honored forms of Sutra and Karika. देखो, हम ऐसा कुछ लिख रहे हैं जो कि kind of Sutra Karika जैसा ही है, vibes दे रहा है. वो प्रमाण करना बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट था इन लोगों के लिए, ताकि इनका स्टेटस में ना डाउनफॉल हो जाए. Through which Sanskritic learning were transmitted ना, सूत्रा और कारिका. तो वैसा ही हम एक लिख रहे हैं मेस्तक. और हम जो ये एक्सेल शीट है लिख रहे हैं, ये एक्सेल शीट में हम जो काम कर रहे हैं वो काइंड ऑफ सूत्रा जैसा ही है, यू सी. एंड वो जस्टिफिकेशन उनको नहीं देना पड़ता अगर वो खुद इतना रिचुअल पोल्यूशन ना करते, मगर ऐसा ही है. वो भी डॉक्यूमेंटेशन था, वो भी प्रोपगेशन था ऑफ आइडियाज. एक्सेल शीट में तुम डॉक्यूमेंटेशन करो, क्या है. Another was deny any connection of the material with the Muslim rulers whom they had to serve and to attribute it wholly to the great minister of the last Hindu king of Maharashtra. Finally, of course, it could be confronted directly by arguing that Himadri had anticipated the evils of the Kali Yuga and provided for the preservation of the preeminence of Brahmins by devising an impenetrable script and difficult procedures that made them indispensable to every regime. Okay? देखो, फिर से बाबूगिरी कहां से. ऐसा एक पागल एग्जाम बनाओ यूपीएससी के नाम पे जो कि इतना कठिन हो, which then helps you further a circular argument कि हम आईएएस बड़ी आदमी क्यों है, क्योंकि हमको यूपीएससी जैसा कठिन एग्जाम देना पड़ा. यूपीएससी जैसा कठिन एग्जाम क्यों दे रहे हो, क्योंकि हमको आईएएस बनना है. मगर आईएएस क्यों बनना है, क्योंकि वो बढ़िया प्रोफेशन है. बढ़िया प्रोफेशन क्यों है, क्योंकि हमने यूपीएससी दिया. देखो ये वैसा है. The same unease can be seen addressed in another way by the myth of Gangadhar Pant and Hasan Gango Bahmani discussed earlier in this article. The tenacious grip of the Maratha Brahmins excited considerable animus among the enfeebled successors to Mughal power in the Deccan. The last testament of the first Nizam Asaf Jah of 1748 stated, "The Deccani Brahmins are fit to be killed and their heads severed. This is my experience, and this is what Hazrat Khuld Makan or Aurangzeb used to say. You don't say. Their 2 leaders are Moru and Ramdas. They are undermining the Muslim state. It was the order since days of Alamgir Badshah that wherever Brahmins were to be found, they should be seized and imprisoned. This was merely the exasperated fulmination of a frustrated state builder and much beaten general." The Brahmins' control over lower clerical office was not even remotely challenged until well into the 20th century. Exactly. Late in the rule of a more persistent and powerful community of Yavanas. Oh my God, सुमित गुहा देखो क्या ट्रोल कर रहा है, बोल रहा है कि देखो भाई लेट 20th सेंचुरी में बहुत persistent and powerful community of Yavanas, वो जिसको तुम दूर रखना चाहते थे, वो मुस्लिम्स तो फिर अब क्लेरिकल में काम में भी घुस गया ना, वो आने से पहले तक ब्राह्मण्स का कंट्रोल ओवर लोअर क्लेरिकल ऑफिसेस वाज नॉट चैलेंज्ड. What an insane paper. Let me check some comments and then we'll go offline. I need to go away quickly. Hindus do not even have the freedom to set up their institutions properly, or yes, the poverty is an excuse. Why aren't piss poor Muslims converting? Why are Yemenis who are poor as fuck converting to other religions? Dada Ananda is replying to Cheap Thrill's comment on how hard is being Hindu and acha. Yeah, I don't have the mental bandwidth to get into that now, so I'll just go offline. So what is your overall opinion then, Dada? For that you'll have to go in the listen from the beginning only. Somewhere in the middle of the live stream, I gave sort of an explanation about why I'm reading this paper and what are my key takeaways from all papers like these. That this is reality. It is what it is. किसी को weaponize करके ये casteism फैलाना है या फिर Brahmins को गाली देना है, तो I'm not interested in that. That the Brahmins were crafty like not that other community. They were crafty like any other community. दिमाग है तो भाई crafty ही होगा. My opinion is that humanity in general macro level पे हरामी ही है, which is why we survive. Micro level पे humans are usually nice people. के मतलब मान लो कि तुम्हारा नेबरहुड में सबसे हरामी, सबसे मादरचोद चोर तृणमूल का गुंडा भी अगर रास्ते से चल रहा है और सामने से कोई गिर जाता है तो उसको शायद उठाने जाएगा. तो वैसा ही है ह्यूमैनिटी. तो ठीक है. When are you coming back, Dada? Tomorrow probably I'll do a podcast with Rebecca Barsef of Israel. She hasn't confirmed yet. She has some meetings before that. If she confirms, then today we are doing that. If not, we are doing some paper. And then Saturday we'll have Rami Niranjan Desai ma'am. Okay then. Thanks for joining the live stream, guys. Good night.
श्रवरूढं महाभीमं गुणाद्रष्टाम्बरप्रदं मत्स्य युक्तं त्रिनेत्रं च कपालकर्णिकाकरां मुक्तकेशीं ललज्जयः पिबन्तीं रुधिरं चतुर्बाहु समायुक्तं वराभयकरं स्मरेत्. चतुर्बाहु समायुक्तं वराभयकरं स्मरेत्. काली काली महाकाली कालिके पापहारिणी धर्मर्थ मोक्षदे देवी नारायणी नमोस्तुते. धर्मर्थ मोक्षदे देवी नारायणी नमोस्तुते. काली 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 काली